Humanity is standing at a crossroads, and the old ways of thinking simply won't save us. Gregg Braden challenges us to question the outdated scientific assumptions that shape our understanding of life and civilization, arguing that they lock us into unsustainable behaviors. If we don't shift from competition to cooperation, we risk perpetuating the crisis that threatened our survival. In this speech, Braden reveals groundbreaking discoveries about humanity's ancient origins, the interconnectedness of our emotions with the Earth's magnetic field, and the power of collective heart-brain coherence to create real change. He urges us to embrace new truths and apply them, not just in thought, but in action, to overcome the challenges of our time. The stakes couldn't be higher, but the opportunity is clear. By transforming how we see ourselves and the world, we can tip the scales towards peace, healing, and a sustainable future. Special thanks to Liz Dawn for partnering with us to release this content exclusively on our YouTube channel. And if you make it all the way to the end of the video, leave a believe in the comments so I can celebrate with you. Believe.
I was thinking about you all while I was in the shower this morning. And here's what I was thinking. I am very aware that every one of you have rearranged your entire lives to be here in this room with me right now. Many of you don't even live in this state. You have left your homes, you left your families, you left your jobs, you've traveled, you've spent money on hotels, on trains, on gasoline, on airplanes to be here. I just want to begin by acknowledging that I recognize that, and I'm so honored that you would take the time to be here. It would be a really empty room if you weren't here. It'd be really quiet. And my prayer is that what we do here together honors the energy and the effort that you have placed into being here with me. So I personally want to say thank you for making that possible. I have some images in here. This is an intimate experience that I want to share with you. I could come on the stage with no images at all and just talk to you, and it would be a good program. But I have dedicated the bulk of my adult life searching this world in places where many people don't often have the opportunity to go. And I'd like to be able to share those images with you. Many of them are images of our indigenous family. The monks, the nuns, the abbots from Tibet, from monasteries in Egypt and Bolivia and Peru. And here's why we're asking for no pictures. Once those pictures show up somewhere on the World Wide Web, in our exuberance, people put them on Facebook. They share them on their websites. Many of the people that we talk to in those countries are forbidden to communicate with Westerners. And when their images show up and the governments see those pictures, they know where they live, they know who their families are, and they can make life very, very difficult. Other authors have had this experience, not me, but other authors, where these people actually end up in prison because they've been communicating with Westerners. So this is an invitation for you to help me honor our family. This is our indigenous family throughout the world. Are you okay if we do it that way? All right. So I appreciate that. We're going to move very quickly today. Some of you are familiar with my work. Some of you have never been with me before. So I just want to say this. I'm not going to speak directly about the books of the past. However, the content will be implied. If you're interested in the science that tells us beyond any reasonable doubt that there's a field of energy that connects all things. It's no longer a hypothesis. It's not a theory. It's not New Age thinking or wishful ideas. It is a scientific fact that there's a field of energy that connects all things. It underlies this physical reality. The book, The Divine Matrix, is the book that you would like to read if you want to know more about that field of energy. Almost universally, our indigenous ancestors tell us from the moment that we take our first breath in this world, you and I are born communicating with the field that connects all things. Not verbally, we do it through the power of human emotion in ways that science is only beginning to understand, but that our ancient traditions, our most cherished traditions, have understood for a very long time. If you'd like to know more about that, the book, The Spontaneous Healing of Belief, is the book that will help. This book is probably worth the price of the book just for the scientific references in the back, in the bibliography. You know that this is no ordinary time in the history of our lives, in the history of our nation, in the history of our world. And for many people, it comes as a surprise in the West. However, when you move beyond the West, beyond the modern industrialized world, the fact that the universe works in terms of cycles and that we are ending a series of powerful cycles in our lifetimes, multiple cycles are converging in this lifetime to bring about the changes that we must now deal with. We're going to talk about those changes today. If you'd like to know more about those cycles of time, Fractal Time. It came out in 2009. It's a New York Times bestseller. It is a book that has reached far into the mainstream to help us understand these cycles and what they're all about. Last month, a new book, it was entitled Deep Truth. We're going to talk about this book today. Deep Truth, the false assumptions of science that have led to many of the crises that we're facing today, the new discoveries that give us a reason to change those false assumptions, and the description of why there is so much reluctance in the mainstream media, mainstream science, mainstream classrooms, mainstream textbooks. They will not carry the new discoveries. They're not sharing these new discoveries. The result of that is that it keeps our young people locked into the way of thinking that's led to the crises that we're experiencing today. And the good news is that that is beginning to change. We've got to change it quickly, and you're going to see why and how and where all this comes from today. But this book, Deep Truth. I want to begin by helping to understand, this is, for some people, it's a very presumptuous title, Deep Truth. I'd like for you to see precisely where this title comes from. In a conversation that Niels Bohr, the pioneering physicist, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist of the 20th century, was having with Albert Einstein in the mid-20th century, they were talking about the nature of truth, and in this case, about the nature of scientific truth. And Niels Bohr made a statement that was so profound, and I always wonder, I often wonder when I am talking about this, if he knew when he was making the statement that he was making a profound statement. Somebody actually asked me in the hall yesterday, coming to the program today, they said, Gregg, are you going to say anything profound in this workshop? I said, hell, I don't know. How do you know until you say it? So I'm wondering, did Niels Bohr know that what he was saying was profound? I'm going to share this statement. This is what he said, quote, "It is the hallmark of any deep truth that its negation is also a deep truth." Now, he was talking about scientific truths, and what he was saying is it's the hallmark of a deep truth of science. When we find a new discovery that overturns what we used to think was the truth, the new discovery becomes the new truth. That's the good news. Now, I was trained as a scientist. I want to be very clear about this. I support the scientific method. I think science is good. I think our lives are better largely because of science. Science does not have all the answers. There are huge gaps, glaring inconsistencies in the scientific understanding of our world. Science is only as good to us as we are in the honesty with which we use it. We must be honest with our science. Science is designed to be constantly updated with new information. When there's a mystery in the world, we develop a hypothesis to explain that. When new information comes to light, we update the hypothesis. That's the good news. What's happening today, that system has broken down. There's a scientific story of you, me, our origin, how we work in the world, our relationship to our bodies, how this world functions. It's a scientific story that's been perpetuated for over 150 years. There is a tremendous reluctance to change that story. Ego, money, power, and a lot of other reasons. Now, that would be important at any time, but it's especially important because of where we are in our lives and our world right now. That's what today is all about. We're going to talk about the new deep truths that overturn 150 plus years of scientific thinking and help us to get out of the mess that we find ourselves in on a global basis today. This isn't just the United States. It's not just the modern world. The entire world is on the brink of multiple crises. And the experts are telling us we've got about 3, maybe 3 to 5 years to figure it out. When it comes to the big war that's brewing in the Middle East, that I'm sure you're all aware of, we don't even have 3 years. And if we try to solve that problem with the thinking that we have used in the last 100, 150 years, we know where that's going to lead us. So, where are we going today? We're going to talk about the breakdown, the world crises that we're facing today, the false assumptions of science that got us there, the new discoveries that tell us the old ideas are false. It wouldn't do any good to talk about any of that if we couldn't do something about it. So what can we do? I'm going to begin by saying it's not our imagination. It's not just the Mishka family. It's not just the New Age community or the New Thought community. The best minds of our time are telling us that we live a world in crisis. They're telling us that right now, this generation In our lifetime, in these years, we are facing the greatest number of crises ever to face a single generation in 5,000 years of recorded history, and that each crisis in and of itself is of the greatest magnitude. If one of those crises is left unchecked, it can end the world as we know it today. We've never had to face something like this as a global family to the best of our knowledge. We're living what's called a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm, a rare convergence of natural cycles of the earth. And I'm going to stop right there with that statement. We're living natural cycles of the earth that are pushing our ways of thinking and our ways of living to the limits. And the ways of thinking and living that are no longer sustainable, they are lighting up all over the place. And the big one that has everybody's attention right now is the breakdown, and make no mistake, it is a breakdown in the global economic system that probably cannot be reversed. It cannot be reversed because it is based on a false assumption of an unsustainable way of thinking. Today I'm going to talk about the thinking that has led to it. This is where we find ourselves today. The cycles. Our scientists know about these cycles. They're triggered by Earth's location in space. And you say, well, nobody told me about that when I was in school, and nobody told me. I mean, I wish when I was in school somebody would have told me that Earth's position in the heavens would reach a critical location in my lifetime that forever changed the way I think and live on this world. But nobody told me that. There's a whole story we could go into there, but I'm not going to do it. So, the orbit of our planet, the tilt, the angle of our planet with relationship to the sun, the center of our Milky Way galaxy. It sounds technical. It's not. It's very intuitive. It makes tremendous sense. When we change where we are in space, it changes the kind of energy that we get from the sun, the heat from the sun. It changes our relationship to other astral bodies, and that changes the way we live on Earth. Our own science now has confirmed it, and interestingly, what they confirmed correlates with what our most cherished and ancient and indigenous traditions have always told us. For 5,000 years, they told us that we were reaching this point, and different traditions look at it from different ways. The religious community looks at it from their perspective, the scientific community from their perspective, the Native Americans from their perspective, because everyone learns differently. So it's not our imagination, and the best minds of our time published a special edition of the journal Scientific American. This was September 2005, to bring the rest of the world up to speed with what was then not common knowledge. And the title tells the whole story, Crossroads for Planet Earth. I mean, that's telling you, these are the scientists telling us something big is going on. And they, in this special edition, they contributed a number of different essays and articles, the things you would expect. They talked about climate change. They talked about the growing shortages. And there is a shortage of food, and the critical thing is fresh water on this planet. Now, we may not know it here. I mean, look at all this bottled water we've got floating around this resort. But I'll tell you, I've spent the last 5 years, I've been on every continent of this earth, and fresh water is rapidly becoming a rare commodity. And I'm going to invite us all to cherish all the fresh water that we have. There's a lot of water on the planet, not all of it's drinkable. And now that we have, as of last week, our 7 billionth member of our family, we all get thirsty. And we're going to need a lot of water. They knew that. The economic crisis. Now think about this. This was 2005. The scientists knew the economic crisis was coming. They wrote about it. They did their best in the scientific community to warn people about it. But that doesn't make it into the mainstream. They knew. It's just that the mainstream didn't inform us. The danger of global war. And this weekend is a big weekend. The choices are being made about whether or not Israel is going to intervene with the Iranian nuclear power plants. If they do, you know that England and the United States has to be involved in some way. The potential for a really big mess is brewing right now. The experts are telling us about this in 2005. They said they saw this on the horizon. And our unsustainable population placing a demand on all the resources. E.O. Wilson was one of the contributors to this special edition, Harvard University. What he said was this. I love this quote. He said that we are entering what he called a bottleneck in time. I love the image, the visual from that. It's like everything that we've known from the past is being squeezed through this little window of time. He said when our resources and our ability to solve our problems will be pushed to the limits. This was 2005. I think we're reaching those limits right now. We're all being tested right now. If you're in this room right now, what I know is you probably spent most of your adult life searching for the answers beyond the obvious. If you're in this room right now, I don't know you personally, but I bet I know this about you. Let me just look. Oh, yeah. I bet everyone in this room, I bet you all are the ones that your friends and your family and your loved ones and in your workplace, they've always looked at you and thought you were a little odd. See? You're a little out there, right? A little out there? Not in a bad, am I right? Not in a bad way, but it's because you're always willing to look at things differently. You look beyond the obvious. When the obvious breaks and it doesn't make sense, they come to you and say, what happened? Why did my marriage end? Or why, after I run 20 miles every day for 50 years of my life and I drink this mushroom drink in the back of my refrigerator and I wear just the right tourmaline over just the right chakra, for just the right time of day, why did I just go to a physical with my doctor and find something in my body that shouldn't be there? And they'll come to you and say, why? What happened? Because you look beyond the obvious. All right? Well, I think that's precisely where we're going right now. It takes people that look beyond the obvious to live what we claim in our hearts and what we've learned from the past. Now is the time. If we're ever going to apply all these things that we claim that we've learned and we've become, this is the window of time to do it. And the experts are telling us that right now. They're telling us that we're living a time of extremes, and they're telling us that we must act. And this is where it gets really interesting. How are you supposed to act? What are you supposed to do? They're telling us all these things are breaking. They're saying we got to do something fast, but how? And this is the reason I wrote this book. Here's the question. How can we possibly make the greatest choices of our survival as individuals, families, communities, as nations? How can we make those choices until we know the deepest truths of our existence? It's a good question, huh? Think about it. Think about that. The way that we answer, the way that you answer a single question, the way that you answer one question holds the key. The way that you answer the question I'm about to ask you is the reason for every decision you've ever made about anything in your life or will make. The way you answer the question I'm about to ask you is the basis of every choice that you've ever made or that you will make in your lifetime. It's at the heart of every challenge that will ever cross your path. It's the way you answer this one question. It is deceptively simple. Do you want to see that question? You have to say yes. If you say no, this is a really short program, and then we can go see somebody else. Okay. Here's the question. Don't be deceived by the simplicity. The question is simply this. Who am I? Or, we're all together in this, who are we? The way we think of ourselves, our relationship to our bodies, our relationship to the earth, our relationship to other people, is the filter through which we will make every choice, every decision, and how we will answer every challenge that comes to us. You all are here this weekend hearing a lot of brilliant people in very different ways answer this question. Who are we? From many, many different perspectives. Who are we? I don't think there is a single answer. It's something that you must come to terms with for yourself. The key is that we've been led to believe that we are certain things by our families, by our communities, by the science of our modern Western world. For the bulk of my adult life, I have searched the world beyond the Western traditions to answer this question. And I see you're pointing at my haircut already. I saw that. I saw it over here out of my peripheral vision. They were pointing at my haircut. So I have changed over the years. I have been on a long journey that continues to this day. And my journey has taken me into some of the most amazing places in the world, some of the most beautiful monasteries at the highest elevations that I have ever endured in my entire life, almost 18,000 feet above sea level. Some of the most humble mud and brick monasteries in the deserts and the mountains of Egypt and Bolivia and Peru. Some of the most amazing temples throughout Southeast Asia. I've had the opportunity to meet with the people that preserve and protect the records of the past. And I asked them, can we see your libraries where you have 2,000 years of history stored? And this little monk is opening a door right here to take us into this library so that we can see the records. You're looking at the corner of a room that has been here for 1,500 years. These are books, loose pages within those books. And these books are based on information that's even older, that was carved on rocks. And we find the traditions in other texts as well. And I have had the opportunity to translate these myself and to see myself what our ancestors were trying to tell us so desperately in their time, in many, many different traditions. Now, obviously, there are places here where each of these images could be a whole workshop unto itself. But I'm going somewhere with this. What I'm hoping to share with you is that there's a common theme. There's a continuity. Are these old? Yes. Are they obsolete? No. There's a continuity between us and those who have come before us. And that continuity is shared by those who live the traditions. I have had the opportunity to live with people who study and perpetuate the practices that are preserved in those texts. I've shared meals with them. I've been with them when their children are born. I've been with them when their spouses have died. I've been with them in revolutions where we went into the country and one government was there. We came out of the jungle and another government was there in Peru. So we've had the opportunity to meet these people. These are sadhus in northern Nepal and the tantric masters that live in northern India. I've spent time with the indigenous people and the monks and the nuns and the lamas, the Buddhist traditions. And they're not all men. People ask me, where are the women? There are many, many very sacred and women that are considered holy in these other traditions when you move outside of the West. I've spent time, tremendous amounts of time, with the shaman in the high Andes of Bolivia and Peru. Isn't that a beautiful little man right there? I love this picture. It was taken only 2 years ago, and I was just with him in August of this year. Somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago, I was in New York, if we were all sitting down when this picture was taken. In the end, no, we're standing. And he's just not a very tall man. It's one of the reasons I loved going down to Peru, because I just tower over everybody in Peru, So, and if you think I'm tall, my mom is 4 foot 8 inches tall. So Mom, when she's down there, they're all people about her height. She would love to be down there. But I've had time to spend with these people, to study with the healers, with the people that create the sacred sounds in the indigenous traditions, and with the pilgrims like this man, who have dedicated their lives to understanding the mysteries, and the nomads like this woman who live the mysteries every day in very unassuming ways as she tends her herd of yak at 16,500 feet in a Tibetan pass near the Nepalese border. All of these people, as different as they are from one another, they all preserve elements of the wisdom of our past. In their traditions, and this is the point, their traditions allow for the cycles, they allow for the change, they allow for the time that we're living. Our tradition doesn't. So our tradition was caught off guard. We think something's wrong. We think the earth is broken. We think we broke the earth. None of that's true. What is true is that we are living a rare and precious moment in the history of our world, in the history of our species. We've got the opportunity to tip the scales of peace and healing and life in our favor, and to really do it well if we embrace this opportunity. For 5,000 years, our ancestors asked this question, who are we? Science is only about 300 years old. It's a good language to help us understand our world. It's a method that's only about 300 years old. Science began about the time of Isaac Newton. For 300 years, science has tried to do the same thing. The problem is that science doesn't believe the answers they come up with. Science says, who are we? They go through the explorations, they come back with an answer, and they say, oh, that's not the right answer. And so those answers are not published, they're not carried, they're not reflected in the mainstream media. Science, as good as it is, now technology is amazing. The technology is what gives us our iPhones, our iPads, but the science that gives us the keys of our existence is stuck on the big questions of life. Science is yet to even define what life is. You cannot find a single definition for life in the scientific community. Each area of study defines it in its own way. There's no unified, agreed-upon definition of what life is. Science is yet to define for us how life began. Science is yet to find where this unified field theory is that we've been looking for 50 years. The best minds, the most money, the most complex machines ever built by the human species. If we were on the right track, don't you think we'd be a little closer to the answer right now? Don't you? Maybe you don't. The scientists are being confined to a way of thinking that limits them and prevents them from exploring the places where I believe those answers really lie. And you're going to see this as a consistent theme that we find throughout the work that we're doing today. Science is yet to answer where we come from. Science, I think it's the right method. Why am I talking about science so much? Here's the reason why. You all are part of what I would consider the choir. We are the choir. And many of the things, although this may be new information, the ideas are not going to be new to you. New facts, but the themes are very common. And we love the choir. The choir for 30, 40, 50 years has perpetuated and helped us to carry this message. Here's the deal. We have a world that's teetering on the brink. And if we are going to bring these ideas to a greater audience, we've got to reach way beyond the choir. Way beyond the choir. And we must do it with a language that is trusted and respected in the places in the world where those decisions are being made. Science happens to be that language. If I go into the monasteries in Tibet, they'll giggle. If I tell them about quantum physics, they'll just laugh. They'll giggle. They don't need to know that. And you probably don't need to know it. But I'm sharing with you the science because your left brain likes to know that the facts are there to free your right brain and your heart for the experience. And that's why I'm going after it in the way that I am here. Science is the right method, but the false assumptions of science, the facts that are no longer facts, keep us on the wrong track. So what I'd like to do is this. I'm going to quickly share 5 assumptions. When I was in school, these were taught as facts. When you were in school, they were taught as facts. And unless your young people are in very progressive school systems, they're being taught as facts today, this moment. 5 assumptions. We're being taught, number 1, that evolution explains life in general and human life specifically. We're being taught, number 2, that civilization began about 5,000 years ago. Number 3, we're being taught that consciousness is somehow separate from our physical world. Number 4, that the space between things is empty. And number 5, that nature is based on survival of the strongest. If you're taking notes, I see some of you are trying, just jot a couple of words down, and then at the top, write that all of these are false, and then put one of these things right through it. Because every one of these is scientifically, categorically now proven to be a false assumption in peer-reviewed technical journals. Mainstream media is not reflecting it. Mainstream classrooms are not changing the teachings. The textbooks aren't being updated. Every one of these is false. Now let's go in and take a look at just a couple of these and why they're important. Here's the reason this is all important. I'm going to share something that's called the pyramid of thinking. And this pyramid of thinking relates the question of who are we to different aspects of our lives. The way we think of the origin of life itself, the way we think of the origin of human life, of our lives, the way we think of our relationship to our body, our relationship to the world, the history of civilization, and how we solve our problems. This is a hierarchical relationship. These are all related. And when we change the way we think of the origin of human life, it changes everything from that point up because they are hierarchical relationships. Here's why that is important. We have been led to believe through the false assumptions of science that life itself is random. Scientists say, and I'm going to generalize this, that given enough time and the same conditions, life would happen again anywhere in the universe just the way it happened here. And that human life is the same thing. There's nothing special about human life, is what they're teaching. It's rare, but given the same conditions, that it would happen again. That our relationship to our body is that we are separate from our bodies, and we are very limited in terms of what we can do to heal our bodies or to change the conditions of our bodies. That we're independent from the earth. And as a matter of fact, one of the mandates of science is to conquer nature. That is actually one of the mandates that you see in the scientific literature. That civilization happened once. It's a one-way deal. It started primitive. Here we are at the pinnacle of the sophistication today. And if all that was true, which it's not, but if it was all true, maybe it makes sense to solve our problems through competition and conflict, which is what we're doing right now. But the new discoveries show us this is not true, which means competition and conflict isn't the way to solve the problems, and that's going to be important in just a few minutes. Those false assumptions, if you want to know where they've led us, we need look no further than the world around us. How we think about our food, how we think about our relationship to climate change. Look at Time magazine, How to Win the War. They're seeing climate change as a war that must be won rather than as a condition, a rare condition that we adapt to and help one another to get through. We'll never win the... I want to tell you, the only way to win the war on climate change is triggered by Earth's location in space. The tilt, the angle, the wobble, and the orbit. The only way you're going to win that war is if you change the tilt, the angle, the orbit, and that's something I know you don't want the government messing with. You do not want governments messing with Earth's location in space. I say that because there are proposals out there to do just that. There are proposals saying we can change the tilt, the angle, the wobble, and the orbit, and it'll take care of climate change. If you see that come up in a vote, vote no. We don't want them to do that. All right. So, all of these have led to global extremes. But those global extremes in our lives become human extremes. And every one of us are touched by the human extremes because they become personal extremes. And if you're in this room, what I know is that everyone in this room, you are being touched directly by the changes in our world, and you know people who are just going through hell right now because of the changes in this world. Family, friends, loved ones. I'm amazed, but I'm no longer surprised at the stories that I'm hearing. I would expect a lot of change because of where we are in the cycles. So these 5 false assumptions, I want to take a look at a couple of them. I'm going to ask your permission. Some of you have been with me before. Many of you spent your lives studying these false assumptions in one way or another. If I say to you, the space between things is empty, we know it's not empty. There is no empty space. There's energy everywhere. Can we just cross that one off right now without talking about it? You okay with that? In the interest of time, I think it's a good thing to do. Consciousness separate from our physical world. You know that's not true. You all have heard Deepak's work in quantum physics. You know that consciousness is the stuff that underlies all physical reality. And when they write consciousness into the unified field theories, the equations work. So, you okay if we cross this one off? Just say yes. Oh, good. Okay, thank you. All right, now let's look at 2 that are closely related, number 1 and number 5, evolution and nature based on survival of the fittest. By the way, some of these topics that we're seeing here are going to be very hot topics in the 2012 election cycle. What can be taught in the schools about evolution and human past, climate change, but a lot of these are actually going to be keys in the election cycle coming up this next year. All right, so let's take a look at these. Up until 1859, the understandings of human origin and our existence and how things work in this world were largely left to the church to deal with. Up until 1859, many of the big questions about who we are and our existence, our relationship to the earth, they were answered through the religious community in the West, largely through the Catholic Church. In 1859, that changed. Charles Darwin was a scientist. He devoted much of his adult life to traveling specific places in the world and observing nature, and he drew conclusions from what he observed. He published his book in 1859. It was called On Origin of Species. I like to ask this question. Okay, who in this room, now there has to be somebody, who in this room has a beautiful, hard-bound version of The Origin of Species on your bedtime for light bedtime reading that you pour through every night as you're going to sleep? I do. You don't have one? Okay. It would put you to sleep pretty fast. You're going to see some of his language here in a minute. The title of his book, as you probably know it, and if you go on Amazon or something, this is what the title looks like. Now, I apologize for having my back to you all over here, but I'm looking over there. That screen should have been in the middle of the room, but it's not. So I'll stand over here for a few minutes. How is it over here? Oh, you can see. Thanks. Okay, thanks. The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. That's the title that most people know this book by. There is the full version of the title that now is hidden inside the first couple of pages of the book. I think it's important because it gives us insight into Darwin, his thinking, and his perspective. I'm going to share that title with you right now. The origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. That's a whole different vibe, isn't it? That's why they put it on the inside. It's a whole different vibe. What Darwin said, and I just want to be very clear, I'm not down on Charles Darwin. He was a scientist. It was in the mid-1800s. He could not possibly have known then what we know now. In my opinion, this is where Darwin went wrong. He tried to use science to explain what only religion had explained before, and I think that was a good thing to do. In my opinion, this is a Greggism, this isn't a fact. Here is where I believe he made a mistake. He took some observations that he made for some forms of life in some parts of the world, and he tried to apply them to all life everywhere, including you and me and all humans. The problem is the facts don't support the theory. The problem with that is that the new facts are not being shared in mainstream. This is going to be a hot topic in the 2012 election cycle. It ties into the ideas of abortion. It ties into the ideas of what can and cannot be taught in the classroom. There are teachers, college and high school professors that are losing their jobs right here in the United States of America right now because they're not even teaching, they are stating that alternative theories to evolution exist. They're stating that the theories exist, and they're losing their jobs for even stating that those theories exist. I think that's wrong. And to not allow our young people, the whole story keeps us locked into the thinking that has gotten us into many of the crises we find ourselves in today, and it limits us in terms of our solutions. So this is, in my opinion, this is where Darwin went wrong. What did Darwin say? I'm going to share with you some of his own language. Now, this is a science book, and because these ideas in 1859, they were scientific ideas. They were the first alternative to the religious ideas. So they were embraced quickly, they were embraced widely, and they are deeply entrenched into the way we think today. Now, I'm just going to share with you, here's some of Darwin's own language. He's talking about where life came from. He says all life came from a single cell. It then evolved into everything that we have today. That I'm paraphrasing. Listen to the language. Quote, he says, therefore, I should infer from analogy that probably all the organic beings which have ever lived on this earth have descended from some one primordial form into which life was first breathed. He doesn't talk about where the breathing came from.
My name is Liz Dawn, and I'm with Celebrate Your Life Events. And the presentation that you've been listening to was recorded live at one of our Celebrate Your Life conferences. And this program was created exclusively for Evan's audience. And I'm super thrilled to share this information with you. So come check us out. Take a look at all of our retreats and programs and conferences that we have to offer. Click the link below, and hopefully I'll see you in person. All right, now let's get back to the presentation.
Does that sound like scientific language to you? But this is the science that is being held onto so tightly in any alternative theories. We haven't talked about DNA. The alternative theories of what DNA is showing us are not being allowed in our young people's classrooms based on this kind of thinking and this language. Now, I was trained as a geologist. That's my first degree. So I love to look at this from a geologic perspective. This is a timeline of Earth's history. The top is most recent. The bottom is the oldest. Right here, 545 million years ago, something very mysterious happened. It is called the Cambrian era. Cambrian. Darwin says life began with a single cell, evolved slowly, gradually over long periods of time, and that new elements of life only appeared when they were needed, when there was a need for them in nature. Well, the facts don't support that theory. 98% of all the forms of life that we see on Earth today all formed during this relatively little window of time called the Cambrian explosion. You've all heard of the Big Bang, right, in physics? You all heard of the Big Bang? Yes, no? Audience participation? Yes, no, yes. Okay, good. It was about to become a whole new workshop. I was going to have to talk about the Big Bang. The Big Bang in physics, when the universe began. The Big Bang in biology is what biologists call this, when life began, when 98% of all the forms of life known to exist today, they all showed up here. They didn't evolve slowly over long periods of time. Now, I don't know why they showed up. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that this is not Darwinian evolution. Here's a little chart showing you, here's 545 million years ago, right in here, and all of a sudden, boom, look, all these forms of life, they shoot up right here, right in this little window of time. That's not Darwinian evolution. Now, Darwin tried to apply those ideas to humans as well. And this is where it really falls flat. And this is what's really at the crux of many of the issues in our election cycle that are coming up. As recently as last fall, this chart was being used on a PBS Nova special to show where scientists believe that humans came from. Here we are at the top, Homo sapiens. See these little skinny lines that connect us with all these other forms? Can you see them? Yes? No? Good, okay. If you can't, I'm going to make them blue so you can see them a little bit better. Okay, every one of those lines, if you look at the legend on the chart right down here, those are not based in fact. They are called speculative or inferred relationships. They are not factual relationships. They cannot be, because the facts do not support this relationship. They're inferred connections. How many of you, when you were in school, heard of Cro-Magnon? You heard of Neanderthal? You know, I did as well. Neanderthal, well, Cro-Magnon is no longer used. It's been replaced with another term, and I'll share it with you in a minute. Neanderthal, you may or may not have heard this story. The belief is that Neanderthal is one of our ancestors. 1987, that changed. 2000, it was published in a few obscure journals. Not many people have heard about it since then. They're still teaching that Neanderthal is our ancestor. 1987, the body of a baby Neanderthal girl, an infant, was found in a cave in northern Europe. And she was not fossilized. She was not mummified. She was not frozen. She was preserved so well that her hair, her skin, her bones, and what else? What else was preserved? 3 letters. Absolutely. Her DNA was preserved. All of a sudden, scientists had DNA from a being that's supposed to be our ancestor. By the way, she was carbon dated to 30,000 years old. A 30,000-year-old Neanderthal infant. They could compare her DNA to ours. I'm going to cut right through to the last sentence of the last paragraph of the report that was published in the very prestigious journal Nature, March 30th, the year 2000, page 490. This tells the whole story. It's a direct quote. Quote, "The results suggest that modern human was not, in fact, descended from Neanderthals. The reason is because their DNA and our DNA aren't close enough to be relatives. Since that time, what they found is that not only do we not descend from Neanderthal, but we shared the earth with them. We walked the earth with them. If we shared the earth with them, we couldn't have come from them. They're not our ancestor. So now we know who we're not. So we don't have Grandpa Neanderthal anywhere, or Grandma Neanderthal. But they're still showing this up on the charts. Now, Cro-Magnon is no longer used as a term to describe the form of life. It used to be Cro-Magnon. It's now called AMH, Anatomically Modern Human. And that name is the reason why. Human forms, your body, my body, we showed up suddenly on this earth 200,000 years ago. We used to be called Cro-Magnon. We're now called anatomically modern humans because if you put a Cro-Magnon skeleton here on the stage next to my skeleton here on the stage, except that their leg bones are a little thicker, presumably because they walk more than we do, you can't tell them apart. For all intents and purposes, we are the same. Same cranial capacity, same body proportions. We haven't changed in 200,000 years. That is not Darwinian evolution. I don't know what happened. I don't know what the answer is, and I'm not claiming to. What I'm saying is that what we're being told, what we're being taught, does not explain our existence, and the new evidence is not being allowed in the classroom, in the textbooks, or the mainstream medias or documentaries, or the mainstream science. Many of the mainstream scientists have been around for a long time. They've got the public spotlight. They will not embrace the new discoveries, and there are a lot of reasons why. Money, ego, power. There's a whole story behind this. So, missing links. I know you all came here looking for some information. You want the missing links update on our relationship to the past. How many want to see the missing links update? Okay, good. That's enough. Here's the missing links update. The missing links update is that they're still missing. And I think you'll find that they probably always will be. And this is tough for me because I have very good friends in the universities who are actually working with the Leakey Foundation and Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, in Ethiopia, where they found Lucy and they found Australopithecus and many of these other very interesting creatures. They're teaching us a lot about our past, but it's not us. It's not us. The evidence doesn't support it. The facts don't support it. Now, I have my personal feelings, but I'm leaving those out. This is what the data, this is mainstream publications like Nature, like New Scientist, like and some of the very specific journals. They're telling us that that's not us. This is another chart. Here's us up on top, and what it's showing is that 200,000 years ago we appeared. We don't know where we came from. We just showed up intact like we are right now. We didn't evolve from something else. Okay, so if we really want the answers, if we want to know who we are, I think we need to unleash the brilliant minds and beautiful hearts of a whole generation of young people, give them all the information, and ask them to help us understand what happened 200,000 years ago. What are we afraid of? I know you're not, and I'm not. Not this we, but the big we. What could we possibly find that would upset? And there's a whole conversation, a whole workshop we could have right there. Here is Darwin. Darwin knew that his theory was vulnerable. What he said was, quote, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Darwin expected his theory to be upstaged with new discoveries. He allowed for it. Mainstream is not allowing for it. He just took the first stab. He said, this is a place to begin to get us off of this religious bent. He said, let's start here. And he suspected that his theory would collapse. I see a lot of people taking notes. You don't have to take notes. Here's the reason why. Because everything I'm saying to you is in this great book, Deep Truth, all the charts, all the graphs. Who wants a copy of Deep Truth? Laurie, would you do one on that side? And I'll do one right there. His theory would break down, and it has. And DNA, we haven't even talked about DNA. DNA didn't evolve. DNA is an information storage system. It doesn't follow the rules of biology and evolution. It's a whole story behind DNA. So the bottom line to this, deep truth, beyond any reasonable doubt, evolution does not explain human origins, okay? Now, I like when Darwin begins a statement by telling you that what he's about to say doesn't even make sense. It's not logical. Darwin looked into nature at the way that nature behaves, and he took little examples of nature, and he said these are expressions in one place of general laws that apply to all life. Now, this is a dangerous way of thinking, and I'm going to share with you why that is. So he says, quote, he starts it out, it may not be a logical deduction, but to my imagination, it is far more satisfactory to look at instincts in nature, such as young birds ejecting foster brothers from the nest. So he saw there would be two birds in the nest, another bird looked different, or it wasn't of their species, and they would kick it out and leave it to die. He said, if somebody is different, kick them out, leave them to die. This is what he's seeing here in nature, or ants making slaves of other ants. He says it's easy to see those as small consequences of one general law leading to the advancement of all beings. That law is multiply, vary, let the strongest live and the weakest die. Let the strongest live and the weakest die. This is a dangerous way to think. And you say, well, that was 1859. What's the big deal, Greg? People say that to me all the time. The world you live in right now, consciously and subconsciously, is largely based in this thinking. The economic system that is collapsing at our ankles while we're in this room is based on this way of thinking. Corporations are built not for the good of people, but for the good of the corporation, for the good of the bottom line, for the good of the dollar. And the idea, let the strongest live and the weakest die. I was in corporations in the 80s where corporate raiders came and took perfectly good corporations, destroyed them to sell the pieces to make more money for the shareholders, and destroyed the lives of hundreds and thousands of families throughout the world that used to belong to those corporations. It's a very dangerous way of thinking. Since 1859, the world as we know it is based upon this, and in the 20th century, some of the most twisted, distorted, horrendous atrocities of suffering of humans against humans is directly linked to Darwin's way of thinking. Hitler, in his book, Mein Kampf, actually paraphrased Darwin, but he wouldn't even give him credit. Hitler did it as if it was his own idea. The Little Red Book from Chairman Mao, he did paraphrase Darwin. He did give Darwin credit. He said, because these are scientific principles, it justifies what we're doing to our people. Let the strongest live and the weakest die. It's in the best interest in the survival, ultimately, the survival of the bigger population, is what he was saying. And you all know this isn't limited to the 20th century. It's still happening today. It's a dangerous way of thinking. Now, we're faced with some big crises that we're trying to solve. Many people are trying to solve with the same kind of thinking that got us into the mess that we're in right now. How we deal with the climate change, how we grow our food, how we share our resources, how we distribute the food, the economic system, how we allow that system to serve us rather than become slaves to that system. All of those things are based on that false assumption. Now, there is good news, and I wanted to get to this good news very, very quickly here. Very quickly. I'm pushing the button. Nothing's happening. There it is. Okay. There is good news, and this is the good news. New discoveries are showing us that Darwin's ideas are false. Survival of the strongest is a false assumption. There were over 400 studies that were conducted in the late 20th century. They asked a single question. What is the optimum amount of competition in any environment? In the family, the workplace, the playing field, the classroom? 400 scientific studies came back with the same answer. I'll just ask you, what do you think is the optimum amount of competition? When I say competition, it's not a friendly game of chess or soccer. This is violent competition. What's the optimum amount? You tell me. Absolutely. This is a direct quote, and this is a broad, sweeping statement that's rare for a scientist to make. And this is the result from Alfie Kahn's book, No Contest, The Case Against Competition. Quote, the ideal amount of competition in any environment, in the classroom, in the workplace, in the family, in the playing field, is none. Competition always, always, always is destructive. The very prestigious journal New Scientist took this one step further in 2008. It's a very, very telling article. I'm just going to cut again to the last sentence of the last paragraph of this article about competition in nature. Quote, what we see in the wild is not every animal for itself. Competition is an incredibly successful strategy. In fact, when competition breaks down, the results can be disastrous. Cooperation breaks down, the results can be disastrous. It's because of cooperation that the cells in your body work to allow you to be in this room right now. That's cooperation in nature. It's because of cooperation that life forms can coexist together in ways that they do. So the idea that nature is based on struggle. Struggle can happen in nature, and we've all seen it, but it's not the model of nature. This is a very, very different way of thinking, and it's a very powerful way of thinking. So what we see, deep truth, nature is based on cooperation, not competition at all. Now we can cross out these top and bottom items here, and let's take a look at what we're being taught about civilization. And I'm going to do this very, very quickly because I want to go somewhere else with this. Civilization. When I was in school, when you were in school, we were taught that civilization is about 5,000 years old. If you look at a map that your kids have in their history books right now, 5,000, 5,500 years ago, it says ancient Samaria began right around in here. And everything else that we are taught as ancient history is more recent than that. Ancient Egypt, the Indus Valley in India, Greece, Rome, all of that is more recent than the 5,500-year mark. The problem with that is that the facts don't support it. We're being taught that this is the history of the whole world forever. You know, one of the things I used to ask, I said, well, what happened over here? It's like nothing was going on there. It's like, the whole thing started right here. Well, what the new discoveries are showing, and I'm going to go through this really quickly. New discoveries are showing us that civilization is at least twice as old as what we've been led to believe, and I'm talking about advanced civilization. mathematics, architecture, agriculture, knowledge of astronomy, knowledge of our relationship to the stars and the heavens, advanced civilizations, at least twice as old. Now, this is one of the places we could spend a whole afternoon, and I just want to give you a couple of examples today. I personally have documented some of these sites myself because I wanted to see them. This is, I'm standing on the edge of an active excavation in Caral, Peru. Now, we're taught that civilization began right about 5,000 years ago. This site is now scientifically acknowledged to be the oldest site in all of the Americas. It's older than the Aztec, older than the Maya, older than the Incan, older than the Aztec, older than any of those. The Mexican government is not happy about this Peruvian site, let me tell you, because Mexico used to have the oldest sites up until the time this site was discovered. It's an active excavation. There are 5 pyramids that are there, 2 circular plazas, huge circular plazas. I'm standing in one now. Here's what they look like from the aerial view. And the date that I was there, the scientists actually confirmed, 3 independent labs confirmed that this site collapsed during the time that we're told history began. That this site ended between 5,000 and 7,000 years ago. 5,500 years is when we're told that history began. So this is one example. If it was one, it could be an anomaly, but this is one of many. I'm going to cut to the chase of the oldest site that is now scientifically acknowledged in the open literature. And I'm not going to talk about Atlantis. I'm not going to talk about Lemuria. They probably existed. There's no scientific peer-reviewed studies to confirm it. So I'm staying with the science to be really clean with you all here. But science is telling us some very cool things. This is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. It is largely unexcavated. There are a series of circular temples. 15 to 20 are still underground. I think 4 of them have been excavated. You're looking at one right now. And what you're seeing is the pillars of a site. Now, this is interesting. The site was intentionally covered up 8,000 years ago, so it's already older than anything that we're talking about so far. It was covered up 8,000 years ago, but it's much older. However, because it was covered up, everything in there is really well preserved. So somebody covered this site to preserve it. And now we can look at these pillars that are showing us these images like this. And I'm showing these to you with permission from the Smithsonian Institution, who gave me permission to share these, and they are in the book. When you get to the chapter in the book, they gave me permission to share these with you. This site, they have not even gotten to the bottom yet, and where they are right now, the site is scientifically dated 11,370 to 11,560 years old, or BP, before present. So 11,500 years, that's at least twice as old is what we're being taught in the classroom today. So when we go back and look, here's the history that you were taught, I was taught, your children are being taught. Now, let's start plugging in some of these other dates. Look at what we're finding. Here's Caral, 5 to almost 7,000. Çatalhöyük, we didn't even talk about, in Turkey. The Great Sphinx, I'll talk about tomorrow, but it's dated between 7,000 and 9,000 years old. The Gulf of Combat in India, Göbekli Tepe. So we're seeing a whole pattern. The anomalies are becoming the new story. They're not just anomalies any longer. They're pointing to a new story. Now, if you overlay this onto some geologic information, something very interesting happens. 12,000 years ago is agreed to be the time at the end of the last ice age. 12,000 years ago. Okay? So where you see the blue, that's the end of the ice age. When the ice age ended, there was a bad storm that lasted 4,000 years. Lots of rain, lots of the temperatures warmed, the ice melted, the sea levels rose. There is the bad storm era. Now, what we're looking at are civilizations right on the boundary of this last ice age. And if you are aware of the 5,000-year cycles of the Mayan calendar, we're ending one next year, 2012. It began right here. So the history that we've been taught as the history of the whole world forever isn't the history of the whole world forever. It's the history of the most recent cycle. 5,000 to 10,000 years old is the cycle before ours that's not taught in the schools. And there's a lot of evidence suggesting that there was at least one more cycle before that. There's a whole workshop we could do around that. The key is that civilization is much older than 5,000 to 5,500 years old. It's at least twice as old as we've been led to believe. That is important because it means that humans and advanced civilizations have lived in their time through what you and I are living through in ours right now. Are they old? Yes. Are they obsolete? No. We can learn from our ancestors. How many here believe in past lives? Oh, well, there you go. So, if you believe in past lives, is it possible that you lived in another cycle a long time ago and you left something for yourselves then that you thought you might recognize now? So when you get to the same place in the cycle now, you won't make the same mistakes you made last time around? Is that possible? Yep, nope, I don't know. If you don't believe in it, I wouldn't give it a second thought. Think about that. Okay. Civilization began about 5,000 years ago. We know that's not true at all. Now, these are deep truths, false assumptions that have led us to a way of thinking that says competition and conflict is the way to solve our problems. If all of these things were true, competition probably makes sense. But they're not true. So here's what we know. The origin of life, it is not random. The evidence strongly suggests that there are very precise elements that had to be in place and systems that had to be in place before life could occur. Human life is rare. It appears to be intentional. I'm just going to say this. I talk about it more in the book. The DNA that makes you who and what you are, geneticists have documented in peer-reviewed journals as saying that the DNA could not have combined the way that it did to create you under natural circumstances through nature alone. And then they have to stop there because scientifically they cannot say what happened after. They just said this did not the way that your genes are fused, particularly in chromosome number 2, is the big mystery. The way your genes are fused did not happen through nature alone. That's not Darwinian evolution. Something else happened, okay? So, our relationship to our body, we now know that we're connected and linked to our body. We're connected and interdependent with the earth. That civilization is cyclic at least 2 times, probably more. And with all of these in mind, cooperation makes a whole lot of sense because of these new deep truths. Cooperation and mutual aid. The way we think of ourselves plays a huge role in how we solve the crises and how we solve the problems of our time. Okay, that's all I want to say about that. Are you good with that? Does it make sense, number one? Make sense? Are you glad that we did that? I went quickly. I appreciate you letting me go very, very fast at a very high level. We're going to shift gears. Our ancestors knew this. Maybe not in the language of science, but they knew it in their way. They carried these truths one step further. What they said is that we can tip the scales of peace and life in our favor when we find ourselves at the times of crises in these cycles. And they said that we can do it by a very, very precise way of living, and they did their very best to tell us about what they called life's longest journey. Life's longest journey is a journey of about 18 inches. That doesn't sound like a long journey at all, does it? It's a journey that begins in the center of your logical thinking mind, and you tell me, where does it end up? Absolutely. Life's longest journey into our heart is the key to transcending the crises. But it doesn't make sense until we embrace the deep truths of our existence. Then it makes tremendous sense. Our own science now is beginning to tell us the same thing. Our own science is telling us that there's a two-way relationship. Now, you know that you live on this earth and that you are influenced by the fields of the earth. You're influenced by the magnetic fields. You're influenced by the energy of the sun. I'm going to share some brand new material. Go deeply into this tomorrow morning if you're with me. If you're not, I want you to know now, you are powerfully influenced by these fields. We all know there's a magnetic field of the earth. We know there's a magnetic field of the human body. The open literature is very clear about our relationship. When there's ripples in these fields, social conflict increases, emergency traffic, hospital room visits increase, traffic accidents increase, we know that. Here's the key. The field influences us. What we're now beginning to understand is that we influence the field. This is where we have the power to tip the scales in our favor. Now, if you've never seen this chart, I want you to see it right now. There are 2 satellites right now above the northern hemisphere. Every 30 minutes, they send back a signal telling us how strong the magnetic field that influences us is. Every 24 hours, we get a reading like this. Each box is a 24-hour period. The red is one satellite, the blue is another. And you see there's an ebb and a flow, up and down, up and down, up and down. Right here, can you see that arrow right there? That arrow is important. If you've never seen it, it tells the whole story. This arrow is 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, September 11th, 2001. 15 minutes after the first plane hit the first tower of the World Trade Center, it is believed it took about 15 minutes for those images to circulate the earth through the media and for humans to respond to what they witnessed. We responded through our hearts. It is believed that this chart is showing the response of Earth's magnetic field to millions or possibly billions of people with a heart-based response in a small window of time. It increased the magnetic field of the Earth, strengthened it, it spiked it, and scientists said, oh my God, sort of. That's not what they really said, but that's a whole different workshop. This is being recorded, so I can't really tell you what they said. I'll tell you what they said. That's what they said. I know the people working, they said, okay. You didn't see that, did you? I didn't think so. All right, this told the scientists, remember, the false assumption is that we're separate from the earth, that the things that we do in our lives have little influence upon the earth, that these fields are weak and insignificant. This told scientists that millions of humans coming together in a moment in time have the ability to actually influence the very field of the earth that connects and sustains all life. The magnetic fields of the earth. There is no them and us when it comes to the magnetic fields of the earth. There's a we. Every CEO of every corporation, every leader of every nation is linked to these fields. This led to a series of studies based on this understanding that we influence this field. It led to a hypothesis that strong human emotion, collective emotion, has a powerful impact on the earth. The question is, do we have to have a crisis? Do we have to have a tragedy to trigger that? And the answer is no. That has led to the study and the understanding of an experience that our ancestors knew very well that is called coherence, heart-brain coherence. Every moment of every day, there's a conversation. Right now, it's happening right now between your heart and your brain, my heart and my brain. My heart has a feeling. It sends a signal to the brain. Based on that feeling, my brain releases chemistry into my body. It's either a feeling of well-being, anti-aging, life-affirming chemistry, strong immune system, or it's a feeling of not being safe, stress response, high cortisol levels. Neither one of them is good or bad. It's just that you don't want to live in that stress, high cortisol state every moment of every day. And some people do. And you can see it. They wear it on their faces. They age well before their years. Their immune systems are weak. They've always got colds and flus, and they carry the weight of the world and their families on their shoulders. You probably work with people or you know someone like that. It's all based on what we feel in our hearts. This was the key to our ancestors and what they were telling us. The optimum signal from our heart to our brain, the optimum coherence, is 0.10 hertz. If you can create a feeling in your body that triggers 0.10 hertz, you are in high coherence. So coherence can be created intentionally. It doesn't take a tragedy. Individual coherence is good for the body. When many people do it, it's good for the planet. Collective coherence. That has led to a project that I want you to be aware of. It's called the Global Coherence Initiative. It is the first of its kind, science-based initiative designed to tip the scales of peace in our favor. It's not a byproduct. It is designed to do that. It's a science-based initiative. I'm going to read you the mission statement. Here's the mission statement. The goal is to unite millions of people from varied beliefs and cultures and spiritual traditions and different borders and different life views and cultures to shift consciousness from instability and chaos to balance and cooperation. That's the reason the project was developed. It is a two-phase project. The first phase is building the sensors to tell us what these magnetic fields are doing. This has never been done as an independent project. We've always relied on weather satellites or military satellites. These are ground-based sensors. They look like this as a blueprint, and here's what they look like when they're deployed in the ground. That is the first ground-based sensor based in Northern California. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these right now that are deployed in the locations that you're seeing, possibly a 6th because through the magic of technology, while I was here with you yesterday, the people, the Institute of Heart Math, who heads this up, broadcast a webinar that I pre-recorded last week. So I was on the webinar last night while I was here with you last night. During that webinar, a woman who was listening actually called and contributed to donate the money for a new sensor site. So now we have one more sensor site, even than you're seeing here right now. But these are the sensor sites that are now in place, reading the magnetic fields of the earth and helping us to understand our relationship. Every day the data comes back and tells us more and more about this. This is what we would like the site to look like when it's complete. So here's what we have right now. There is the planned number of sites. I want you to see, though, that this is the data. Every day the data comes back. Each of these boxes is one 24-hour period. The bright areas are the places where human consciousness is very active during these periods. So we can see the response of the fields to human emotion. Right now, there are members in 86 countries that are learning and have been trained to create coherence. About 50,000 members exist right now. So I want you to know that there is a science-based initiative in our time of crisis that is designed to give us a tool and a way to tip the scales of peace and healing in our favor when it looks like, in my mom's words, it looks like the world's going to hell in a handbasket. There's something that we all can do. And it works in a really, really beautiful way. If you'd like to know more about this, go to GL Coherence. It's the website. I think you have a paper there for people that wanted more information. The reason I wanted to share this with you, I want you to know that small personal choices become our big collective answer to this time in history. And this is what I wanted to say to you today. The deep truths give us ways to think of ourselves differently. And this Global Coherence Initiative gives us a way to embrace those new truths and then do something with them in a very real way. We have a few minutes left in here today, and what I would like to do, I'd like to shift gears. Are you okay? Can we go right to the top of our hour? All right, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I touched upon a lot of ideas. I'm going to share a quick example, and then we're going to do something. What good does this possibly do? I was in a ballroom in Paris in the year 2002. There were 3,500 people in the room. And there was a man in the audience, a very angry French man. Security took him out, and they were going to make him leave. And I knew that there were no accidents. I said, ask him to wait outside the door. And while he waited outside the door, what I had hoped to end the program with, we moved to the beginning of the program. And I led the room through an experience of creating coherence for 3 minutes. And then we brought the man back into the room and gave him a microphone and a translator. And I asked him, I said, tell me, what are you feeling? And he came in. I remember he came in like, and he had this look on his face. And it was a very strange look. I said, what are you experiencing? He said, this is so strange. He said, in my mind, he said, I know why I'm angry, and I'm still angry. He said, but I can't feel the anger. And he started laughing. That is an example in the room of what's possible for a planet. When we feed the fields heart-based coherence. Every leader of every nation, every CEO of every corporation is part of that field. It's really hard to declare war on your neighbor when you're not feeling it in your heart. And in that way, we all have a voice, we all have a vote. And in that way, it may be really good that we have the 7 billionth member of our global family because it's more of us to tip those scales. I'm going to invite you to think about it that way. It's been a really wonderful audience. I love every one of you. And I want to thank you for all that you do in this world to make this world a better place. And, if this was the last day on this planet, I think that this room would be a really, really good room to take to another part of the world and begin a whole new world together. We could do it really well, really well. So I want to thank you all. Thank you all so much. God bless. Take care. Many of the problems that we're finding in our world today, the experts are telling us we're facing a time unlike any other time in recorded human history where the greatest challenges ever posed to civilization are being experienced right now. And what makes this such a powerful time in history is that for the first time, as far as we know, the first time in recorded human history, the decisions and the choices that we make have the power to either ensure our survival or end civilization as we've known it. And we've never had that power before. And we've never had to face those kinds of decisions before. Do you all feel the magnitude of what this time in history is all about? What our lives are all about? It doesn't have to be a sad time, but it certainly is a powerful time. It only seems sad to people who feel powerless and helpless and victims in this world. And my goal by the end of our time here today is to share with you the reasons why 5,000, 6,000, 7,000-year-old traditions told us that we are not victims in this world, either of what happens in our bodies or what happens in the world around us, and how our own science is now coming to the same conclusions. The question is, now that modern science is recognizing that we are directly influencing what happens in our world, scientists are saying, okay, yeah, the influence is there, but what do we do with it? How do we use it? How do we apply it in our lives? And this is so interesting to me, because I was trained in the language of science, and I come from the world of science. Science is good. It is a language that describes our universe and our bodies and how we work. Science is good. It's simply a language that describes how the universe works and how we work. But it's a relatively recent language. Science is only about 300 years old. And as good as it is, the best scientists will admit that there are glaring gaps and inconsistencies in what we know in the language of science, on the one hand. On the other hand, there are other languages that have always described the way our universe works in our bodies. They're not scientific, but they've been around a lot longer. Some of them have been around 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 years in the case of the Hindu Vedas. So as a scientist working behind the scenes during the Cold War, a very frightening time in the history of our world, my question was this: was if science and ancient spirituality are the two great ways of knowing in our world, and neither one of them alone can solve the problems, what happens if we marry them together? Doesn't that make sense to you? It makes tremendous sense. What if we marry the wisdom of a 5,000, 6,000, 7,000-year-old tradition with the best science of today into a greater wisdom? Will that help us to find the language to address the challenges of our time today? That was my feeling. My conditioning, however, was that science and spirituality are mutually incompatible. You have to choose one path or the other. I'm going to tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. And where the greatest advances are being made in understanding how the universe works today and how your body works and how your relationships work is when we cross those traditional boundaries between science and spirituality. Honoring both, but crossing the boundary that keeps them separate and marrying them into a greater wisdom, because that's the way we work. Well, what has really, really begun to move this is that the science that our civilization is based upon today is based in two false assumptions. One is the assumption that about 96% of the universe contains empty space, and the other is that our inner experiences of thought, feeling, emotion, and belief have no effect on our outer world. You and I know we're at this conference, so we know that nothing could be further from the truth. But this is a very, very different way for mainstream science and for the majority of the Western world to think about our lives. Fair and balanced news doesn't think about our lives this way. If you watch Fox, CNN, 6 o'clock news, either 6 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock at night, nothing could be further from the truth. And to even suggest, I was watching, there was an interview with Larry King one night, and many of the authors who you are very familiar with, some are here at this program, were on that interview. And when they even suggested to Larry that we somehow can influence what's happening in Iraq, that we somehow can influence the peace in our world, Larry King was upset. And immediately he cut to a commercial break. And when he came back, you didn't hear from that speaker very much anymore. Mainstream. On the one hand, they're not really at a place where they're accepting us. On the other hand, they're asking for this kind of information. So I'm just going to share. Can I tell you a secret? Okay, just between us and that recording right there. Nobody else will know. PBS is working with us on a special that is called The Science of Peace. LeVar Burton is the one who is fronting this project. He's the one that began, LeVar, Geordi from Star Trek. If you go to our website, you can click on the link, and the trailer is already up. Myself, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dean Radin from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, John Hagelin, I think William Tiller. It's a little bit different group than what you're going to see here, but what they're asking for is how is it possible that our inner experiences could affect peace in our world? And the fact that mainstream media is asking for that. They've asked for a 1-hour pilot. If the pilot goes well, they want a 13-part series, and each of those 13 parts is based on one of the people's work that's in the film. So we're very excited about this because, thank you. Thank you very much. But what's interesting is we pitched this almost 6 years ago, and they didn't want anything to do with it. And it means that times have changed enough, and there was a willingness and an openness for what's considered mainstream broadcast to explore the possibility that somehow you and I have the ability to influence our bodies and our world in ways that are meaningful, and especially at this time in history. And I think that's a very, very cool thing to be happening. So these are the false assumptions of science. The reason we know they're false is because of the new discoveries. Number one, the discovery of an intelligent field of energy that links everything. It connects everything. And this field, I want to talk about, this field isn't out there somewhere. It's moving through you. It is you right now. You are that field. Every atom in your body, right this minute, and the minute that just passed, and that minute that just passed, every atom in your body in this very instant is emerging anew from this field as long as your agreement in consciousness will allow that to happen. When you dishonor your agreement in consciousness, then the new cannot re-emerge and you begin to deteriorate. And if it happens long enough, you're no longer in this world. The field isn't, when people talk about this field, their arms go like this. There's a field out there somewhere. Well, it is out there, and it's in here. It's everywhere. This intelligent field is where everything comes from. It's a place. It's a pure space where all things begin. It's the blueprint of all possibilities, the template of everything that could ever be, from the lightest of the light, the darkest of the dark, all of your divorces, all of your marriages, all of the children you have, all the children that you never had. All of the peace, all of the war, all of the joy, all the suffering, it exists as a potential in this field. And what we do, and I'm going to share with you from the ancient perspective and the scientific perspective how we do this. But what we do is this. You and I, in our minds, we reach into that field of possibilities because we visualize what it is we choose to have. And for many people, they stop there, and it's not enough. It's not enough. They stop with the visualization. They see it, they do some mantras, they do some affirmations, and nothing happens, and they get frustrated, and they become disillusioned. That's not enough. Once you identify it, once you lock it into place, you've got to give it life. And the way we do that is the great secret that was lost in the Judeo-Christian tradition 1,700 years ago. That's what we're going to go into today, because it is the power of emotion and belief and feeling, and we're going to define these. That is what it is that breathes life into that possibility that makes it real in our world. So that's the review of what we did yesterday. We also shared, I think, for me, I'm a very visual person. My man brain likes pictures, okay? So my man brain liked to see these pictures. This was an image from the Hubble Space Telescope, the visual image looking at the center of the universe where everything began, those two arrows, and seeing everything, the stars and the galaxies, as separate. And the next image is the same image looking through the eyes of the Shandra Space Observatory, looking and imaging what has believed to be the invisible stuff that connects everything together. And you can see very clearly that things aren't separate, that there's a field of energy, and this is just one wavelength. There are other wavelengths of this field that do the same thing. This field is known by many different names because scientists have yet to agree on one term. It's called the quantum hologram, simply the field, nature's mind. Stephen Hawking calls it the mind of God. Max Planck, father of quantum theory, called it the matrix. We're calling it the divine matrix. And this matrix is what we're going to be, the term that we'll be using today, is this underlying field of energy that provides the container for the entire universe, the bridge between our inner and our outer worlds, and a mirror in our bodies for what's happening on the outside of our bodies. So this is an encapsulation of what we've done in our work, where we were yesterday. If we're going to use this field, we've got to understand how it works. We've got to speak the language it recognizes. And this leads us to what is called the great spiritual mystery. As different as one appears from another, almost universally, the ancient spiritual traditions tell us that there's something that you and I do in our lives that triggers a process inside of our bodies. And when that process begins, it interacts with the forces of creation and affects our physical world. Something that we do in our lives affects our physical world. And you're going to see some examples of that before we leave here today. If you do not understand how this happens, when it does, we call it a miracle. But if you do understand it, it's no longer a miracle. It becomes a technology. If you can create an experience of your body over and over and over again, on demand, consistently, repeatedly, if you can do something in here and create an effect that touches your world out there, man, that's a technology. And to me, that's a very... Okay, we've piloted this program with young people in secondary schools. And I use different languages, different slides. We have a screen. We use butcher paper from the floor to the ceiling, so the whole wall is the screen, and all the images look very real. And when I shared this with them, my language, I said, isn't that cool? I don't have any kids in my life. Cool is not the word that's being used today. So they educated me. They said, well, this is really sweet. So, isn't this really sweet? It's a technology. And I cannot think of a more powerful technology. This rivals anything we could ever build in a machine outside of our bodies. I've worked in the high-tech industry, and I've seen some very sweet technology, but nothing that rivals what we're doing right here. Well, the scientific experiments now are showing precisely the same thing. We looked at some yesterday. It's in the book. I won't do them again today. But what they're saying is that heart-based feeling and emotion changes the DNA inside of our bodies, producing quantum effects that change our physical world. We've said the same thing. And when we do this, we are all participating. We're participating in what happens in our world and our lives. And it's all based on what we believe about our world. So the new discoveries are telling us the power to change our bodies and our world is actually based on something that sounds very non-scientific. It's based on what we call feeling and belief. The feeling and the belief of what is real. So I thought that would be a good place to define feeling and belief. Everybody's talking about it. I sat in on a program yesterday, and then I've heard some other speakers use the terms feeling and belief, but no one's really defined it. And I think it's useful to do that because it means different things to different people. So let's look at an old Sanskrit drawing. This is a page right off an ancient Sanskrit text. You're all familiar with the energy centers, the chakras, that are linked to the endocrine glands in your bodies. So the mineral content of the endocrine gland, the crystalline mineral content, is what's linked to these chakras. What the ancient traditions, in this case the Sanskrit traditions, are telling us is there are 7 of these energy systems. The upper 3, the communication and the imaging centers, are, they say, what are considered to be or associated with what we call thought. So when we think about something, we're using these upper energy centers. What they say, however, is that the lower 3 energy centers are where emotion comes from, and they say that you and I are capable of only 2 primary emotions, and that's all. And Mom and I have this conversation with Mom all the time about the difference between feeling and emotion. Mom says, I always thought feeling and emotion were pretty much the same thing. And I did too. I was raised in a very conservative community in the Midwest, and we use them almost interchangeably. But the ancients make a distinction, and it's a powerful distinction. They say that we're capable of only 2 primary emotions, love and whatever you believe, whatever you think the opposite of love is. Maybe it's love and fear. And when I know this is on the recording now, so I have to be really clear. It'll be out here for 20 years. When you get right down to the deepest teachings, love and fear are two aspects of the same thing. They're very, very closely related, even though they're polarities. They're polarities of the same experience. So what the ancients are saying, in this case the Sanskrit text, they're saying that emotion comes from these lower energy centers, and there are only two primary emotions, love or fear. So we think about something in that field of all possibilities. We capture it in our minds. We visualize it. What it is that we'd like to have, our perfect relationship, perfect health, peace in our world, abundance in the checkbook, whatever it is. And the piece that was left out in many of the teachings, and this is what they're saying, is into that thought we pump, we fuel from these lower creative centers. I used to call them the Michael Jackson centers, but I can't do that anymore because I'd have to go sit in the chair over there if I do. But he always used to do that when he was dancing, so that's why I did it. I was up late. It's okay. And it's just us. So into that thought, we pump our love for what we're thinking, or sometimes subconsciously, our fear for what we're thinking. And when we do, what is the one energy center that's not accounted for? Exactly. It's our heart. And when we do, we create what we call a feeling that is linked with the heart. This is where feeling occurs. Heart-based feeling. Feelings don't happen in your mind. They don't happen in, well, they do happen in the lower centers, but that's a different workshop. It's a whole different program. Okay. That was a bad joke. Okay. When we think about something, and into that something, we fuel it with our love or our fear for that something, we create what we call a feeling. And now we have just defined feeling. It's the union of thought and emotion. Sometimes the emotions that we pump into our feelings are conscious. Sometimes they're unconscious. We do entire programs about how to deal with that. That's not where we are here today. What I'd like for you to see from this is that feeling is based in your heart. And that's going to be really important in just a couple of minutes. Feeling and beliefs are very closely linked. When you believe something, you have a strong feeling about that something, one way or another. Would you agree? Yeah, we usually do. Feelings and beliefs are closely related. So when we have experiences of hate, sadness, joy, compassion, those are not emotions, they're feelings. If we're hating, we're generally thinking about something, and into that thought, we're having a fear. We may not always be conscious of what it is, or our sadness or our joy. These are feelings and beliefs. They're not emotions. Are you okay on that? For some people, it's review. For some people, you've never seen it before. It's going to be important for where we go. Does it make sense? You okay with that? All right. Feeling and belief, the reason that they are so powerful in our lives is because they are a code, literally a code. Feeling and belief is a code that translates those invisible waves of possibility into the stuff our world, our universe, our bodies are made of. Belief literally takes the invisible waves of possibility, collapses, condenses those waves into the particles that become the reality of our world. Does that make sense? If it does, then what it tells you, if it does make sense, it tells you that we are only limited by what we are willing to allow ourselves to believe. By what we're allowing ourselves to visualize and love into this world. So, how does that work? Remember back in the old days, probably when you were in school, when I was in school, and maybe when your kids are in school right now, when we learned about the atom looked something like this. Remember, it looked like a little solar system. It was a thing in the middle with other things that are rotating around it, electrons. This is the nucleus and the electron. Remember that? Well, if you've looked at the brand new textbooks, those days are long gone. The atoms don't look like this anymore. They don't even talk. Remember, electron, proton, neutron, we thought that was tough. Now they're dealing with gluons and muons and gravitons that may or may not be there, and quarks and leptons. And if you're talking about quarks, listen to the spiritual names of the quarks. There are up quarks, down quarks, truth quarks, beauty quarks, strange quarks. And then there's the opposite of all those. There's an up, an anti-truth, anti-beauty, anti-up, anti-down, anti-strange. I've got a whole story about the 2000 elections and anti-truth and strange quarks that happened at the election machines, but that's in a longer program. They don't look like this anymore. Now they're telling us that the atoms look something like this. They aren't things, they are patterns of energy. The quantum atom. Patterns of energy. Electrical energy and magnetic energy. You've all heard this before. We live in an electromagnetic world. Well, if that's true, this is so important. See, for note takers, I put this up here. I knew it would be early this morning, right? Important. If the atoms that everything is made of are made of electrical and magnetic energy, and you want to change that atom, what does it make sense to do? Change the energy, absolutely. See, you could have written that slide. That's how good the matrix works. We're all in tune here. If you're going to change the atom, you've got to change the energy. Well, let me ask you a question. What organ in your body creates, okay, the atoms are made of electrical and magnetic energy. What organ creates this? And don't answer yet, because I'm stumping you, and I've worked hard to give you 2 clues that I want you to see before you answer this question. I'm going to use these slides. What organ creates the strongest electrical field and the strongest magnetic field in your body? And you're saying, I don't know, right? Okay, well, here's the first clue. The first clue comes from a Buddhist monastery, but don't answer yet, because there's an even better one. The second clue. Okay, so what organ creates the strongest electrical and magnetic fields in your body? This is a powerful, powerful knowing. Now think about this. You have an organ right now in the center of your chest that is the strongest biological magnetic generator and the strongest biological electrical generator in your body, but you don't have to know any of that. All you're invited to do is have a feeling. If you want to know why your feelings are important and why your beliefs are important, what you're about to see is really sweet. Okay, and here's the reason why. Because our heart now is up to 100 times stronger than the brain in terms of the electrical field. So if you're asking me the question, Greg, why aren't thoughts as important as feelings? Somebody asked me that question. I'm glad you asked that question. And this is the answer right here. Thoughts are good. They're important. I'm not discounting it, but I'm saying is they're not the whole story, and that it's much easier to create through your feeling world than through your thinking world. And here's the reason why. Your heart's electrical field is up to 100 times stronger than the brain's electrical field, but look at this. The heart's magnetic field is about 5,000 times stronger than the brain's magnetic field. So you remember the images of Uri Geller back in the old days bending a spoon? When he first started doing it, made it look really tough. Man, he scrunched up his face and his veins were popping in his forehead. And that's our conditioning in our world. It's got to be tough for it to work, right? It's not hard to feel. It's not hard to feel as if that spoon is bending, and that's the secret. That's the key to the whole thing. We talked about that Patrick Swayze movie yesterday, Ghost. Patrick Swayze kicking a can, a physical can, is a ghost. The way he was conditioned to do it in the physical world. He's a ghost. There's nothing physical to him. He's kicking, and his foot moves right through the can. And it's only when another ghost comes along, he says, hey man, it doesn't work like that here anymore. You got to feel it. And when he felt that can moving, he felt himself connecting with the can. That's how easy it is. Children know this. But it's this little, it's just this little subtle shift in perspective, a feeling. And what I've learned in our intensive workshops is many people in our part of the world are not even aware of the difference between when they're thinking and when they're feeling. And if I ask them, I invite them to create a feeling, they're trying to do it with their mind. However, if we go into a Tibetan monastery, monks and nuns, they live in their hearts. And they have to work to create a thought. It's a whole different thing. It's a whole different thing. Does this make sense to you why this is important? Your heart is much more powerful in terms of electrical and magnetic fields, the stuff our world is made of. Feelings and beliefs produce these heart waves of energy, but they're not limited to our hearts. Look at where they go. They go beyond our bodies. From a quantum perspective, you don't end where your skin or your jacket or your hair is in that chair. From a quantum perspective, if I were looking at you through my quantum lens, oh, there you are. You're just a big sea of energy, all melding together in a really beautiful way. Because that's the way we work. And that's what allows us to touch our world in ways now that we're only beginning to understand. Those heart waves change the cells of our bodies, and that's very well documented in the open literature. What is a little challenging for researchers right now is that those heart waves are changing the atoms of our physical world. They know it happens. So I'm going to acknowledge this. Scientists know that you and I can affect the physical world beyond our bodies through what we're creating inside of our hearts. The question is, to what degree? And that is where the controversy is right now. To what degree are we capable of influencing our physical world? If you read the research papers, there's a lot of controversy. This is where the action is right now. How many are familiar with the author Neville? Anyone have the opportunity to see him when... Well, we got about 7 hands, and that's a lot for an audience this size. He was a brilliant philosopher. He died in 1974. He's from the Indies, and he wrote under the name of Neville. And if you're not familiar with his work, I'm going to invite you to look into it. He wrote a powerful little book. One is called The Power of Awareness. One is called The Law and the Promise. And there's some other ones out there. Each chapter is about a page long, and you read that page and you think about it for a week. It's one of those kinds of books. The Power of Awareness and The Law and the Promise. 1952, Neville was asked why he was writing the books that he was writing. And his response to that question is the reason that we're in here today. Look at what Neville wrote. Neville said he wrote to reveal, this is a quote, our infinite power against which no earthly force is of the slightest significance. Do you believe that it's possible within your body? Do you have a power within you in the chair right now against which no earthly force is of the slightest significance? Do you believe that that's possible? Do you believe you have that? Do you use it? Why not? Because you and I have been conditioned to believe that that power doesn't exist. There's a part of us, there's a part of our ancient memory that clings to that possibility. We want to believe it. And that's why we're so powerfully drawn to the kinds of movies like The Matrix and the old movies back in the Middle Ages where miracles are happening all the time. People are out slaying dragons and falling in love in really cool places and all that. Because we want to believe that those miracles are still possible. But we're conditioned. And that conditioning probably runs deeper than even you and I can even acknowledge. Deeper than I can acknowledge right now. I was raised in a relatively conservative community in northern Missouri. The show me state. And I was told over and over and over again that in this world we're little more than insignificant specks of dust. And that's about it. And that things just happen. You can be walking down the street living a good life and all of a sudden some disease drops out of nowhere and you're gone in 3 weeks. And that was my conditioning. And even though my mind knows that is not the case, there's a part of me subconsciously that heard that so many times. But to some degree, even I still accept that a little bit. But I want to share with you a little bit. Belief. Belief may be the single most powerful force in the universe. If you are capable of imagining anything in your mind and then breathing life into that possibility and feeling it. And when you do that, you're changing the electrical and the magnetic field in your heart and touching the atoms of your physical world to make that happen. Wow, what could be more powerful than that? What could be more powerful than that? What challenge could we not meet? What disease could we not transcend? What war could we not heal? When the general population really, really gets what you and everyone in this conference and myself, what's happening here this weekend, everything changes. It must. When we really get our power. And the beauty is not everyone has to believe or understand the same thing to benefit. And they probably won't. A relatively few number of people will grasp the power and the significance of this language. And it's kind of like the stock market. When a few of the blue chips do well, the whole market can benefit. I don't know where that analogy came from, but It's kind of like, I haven't watched the market for the last couple of days. Belief, the most powerful force in the universe. I want to share with you an example. This is some of the things, I've never shared this in public before. This is from a trip, 1998, a 22-day pilgrimage into the highlands of central China and Tibet. And you've seen some of the images, but this particular portion I've never shared before because it's an ancient example of just how powerful belief really is. This is, we were up above 16,000 feet above sea level. Nothing grows there. It's just you and the earth and the sky and the water and God. Have you ever noticed how whenever prophets and holy people, when they have a revelation, where does it usually come from? Usually someplace up high where there's no diversions, there's no distractions, there's nothing else there, nothing else to do. You might as well, receive a message from God because there's nothing to eat, there's no fish in the water. I mean, nothing's happening. So we were on this road right here, and it was in the spring. They'd had big snows that year. We thought the roads were clear, and they were for most of the trip until we found this. This is a snow slide that is now crossed. Here's our road right here. This is a snow slide that has come across the road. It's an avalanche. Someone has been able to tunnel through to let some traffic past, but we are in a bus that was brought up from the mainland. And this is our translator. No photographs, please, of any of these. This is our translator. He's sizing up the front of the bus to see if it's going to fit through this tunnel. It's not, and this is where the trip became a real adventure. We never saw that bus again. We left our bus, walked through our little avalanche, and picked up the only mode of transportation that we could find on the other side. We were all on a cattle truck. To go down, but that was fun. To go down to this mountainside and the entrance to this cave where a miracle happened about 800 years ago. How many are familiar with the great Tibetan yogi Milarepa? Anyone in here study? Some of you have never heard Milarepa. Some are very familiar with. I'll just tell you the brief story of Milarepa. And the reason that I'm aware of this, my very first yoga teacher 35 years ago was a Sikh. And we would begin our yoga sessions and he would share stories of Milarepa's life. Milarepa, 800 years ago, was a powerful yogi and mystic in his own right. And he came from a wealthy family, very similar to the story of Buddha. He came from a wealthy family, and so he had all the material wealth, and he also had his psychic abilities. A neighboring village invaded his village and killed his entire family, and he was so enraged that he used his psychic powers to kill at least 35 other people. And when he had done that, he realized that it was a misuse of his power. And from that moment on, his life changed. He left all of his material possessions, all of his wealth behind. He went into a series of caves, and this is one of them. And he never left again. And he stayed through the end of his life to deepen his inner abilities and to honor the gift of life, hoping in some way to compensate for the misuse of his power. The few people that did find him, he had some clothing when he went to this cave. He learned the inner power of psychic heat, so he never had to have clothing for warmth, and his clothing became tattered and shredded. The only thing he ate were the nettles that grow at this elevation around this cave that are rich in chlorophyll. And his hair and his body turned a vibrant green that stayed with him for the rest of his life. And they said if you happened to come up on Milarepa in his cave, it was a frightening sight because his hair was down to his waist, it was green, his body was green, his teeth were kind of yellow-green. He didn't have a lot of clothes on, so it was a pretty scary thing to see. But there were some students that did go and study with him. And one of the things that he was trying to share with them is the power of their belief and that they are not bound by the physicality of this world. And one of the ways that he went about doing that, he lived in the cave. And one of his students said, "Don't you feel confined in this cave?" And I've got a new book coming out in April, and I tell the story in more detail. But briefly, what he said to his student here, he said, this cave provides me shelter. He says, but it doesn't confine me. Here, I'll show you. And he walked over to the wall of the cave, and he put his hand up against the cave. He pushed on that solid wall, the native earth. And to his student, he felt that wall was a boundary, and then Milarepa kept pushing, and his hand went right into that rock. And it happened in a number of places, This is an image of Milarepa on the cave, and pilgrims come by and they place money against the wax. This white is wax that's on the cave wall. And this is an image of Milarepa doing this miracle. And I don't know if this is going to come out very well or not, but this is the place. Here's the altar where it happened. I can see right now. You're not going to be able to see it. It's right there. Oh, you can't even see it on this one. Okay, well, I apologize, but there is a place. And I walked over to this place, and I put my hand. It's about 16 inches deep that he went into the cave wall. And I thought, well, maybe somebody hoaxed it. And when I put my hand in there, it fits so perfectly in that place. I felt in that moment that it couldn't have been hoaxed. And then there are other places in this cave where he did the same with his feet. And the whole point of this is that in his mind, in his belief, the wall was not a boundary. And he embodied that and shared that with his student. When his student saw that happen, his student had to do one of two things. He either had to rearrange his belief system to accommodate what he'd just seen, or he had to walk out of the cave and say, I'm never coming back here again. And this is one of the ways we change our beliefs. We change our beliefs either by being shown the logical reason why something is true or it's not true, and that goes through our mind, logic. Or we're shown a miracle that bypasses our mind and goes right to our heart. And we've seen it with our own eyes, and it forever changes the way we see our world. And hopefully we're going to do both in here today. I apologize, but I thought the image would come out better than that. The question, is that a miracle or is it a technology? Is it a miracle or a technology, the fact that Milarepa was able to put his hand into that wall the way that he did? Well, just how powerful is belief? This is one of the places I promised you that you would have the opportunity to determine where this program goes. So, are you ready for a choice? Was that a miracle or was it a technology? It depends on how you think about your world. Are you open to the possibility of thinking about your world in a really, really very different way? Are you open to maybe stretch? This was 2:30 in the morning. I had a good time with this slide, you know. But seriously, I have to ask you this question because once you say yes, we're going to embark upon a journey, and it's pretty hard to turn back, and I'm going to have to follow it through. And I need your permission, and if you say no, we won't do that. So well, here's the question right here. Do you want the safe reality or the deep reality? Okay, if you want the deep reality... No, I did. We could go either way, but I'm going to show you in just a minute. Okay, well, here's our button. So we gotta press that button. Can we do it? Well, it says access denied. Okay, well, let's see. Maybe we didn't ask the right way. Do we want the safe reality, the deep reality? You chose the deep reality, but maybe what we want is the deep or the really deep reality. Maybe that's it. Do you want the really deep reality? Well, if we press that button, what happens? Well, there it is. Good work. Good work. All right. Got to make it fun. This is a huge concept, and I'm going to go through it quickly. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not doing justice to this concept, and I want to introduce it to you if you are not aware. What we're about to discuss here, this is the buzz, it's the hot topic, it's the controversy, it's the cool stuff that everybody is talking about at the water cooler, in the back room of the physics departments of the major university, mainstream physicists and scientists. These aren't old guys and girls out on the park bench feeding the pigeons wondering what the next hot topic is going to be. And it's sort of underground because it is so out there, yet it makes so much sense. You ready? Okay, here's the question. This is the question that's being asked. And just work with me through this. The very serious question that physicists are asking is about the nature of our universe and our reality. And it's going to sound like a philosophical question, except it gets very real very quickly. They're asking this question. Is the universe that we're living in a virtual reality? Is the universe that we're living in a simulation that has been created for us to have an experience here that we cannot have anywhere else. Sounds like a movie, doesn't it? Where do you think that movie came from? Is the universe really a very ancient virtual reality? Now, we're not talking about who or what or why. I mean, all kinds of questions come up. The question they're asking, is it possible that you and I could be living in a world that's not so real? Let me ask, what have the Aboriginal traditions said to us for about 20,000 years? What do they say about this world? Is this the real world? No, they say it's a dream world. Where's the real world? Somewhere else, right? Christian traditions, what do they say about this world? We're here for a while, but where's the real cool, sweet place to be? Where is it? Hereafter heaven, somewhere else. Native American traditions say the same thing. So this idea is not so bizarre from the perspective of many ancient traditions. Are we living a simulation? Okay, well, my man brain, when I began to see how seriously scientists are taking this, I wanted to see... I mean, I kind of know what a simulation is, but I looked it up. I wanted to see what a simulation is for. Look at this. A simulation. What is the purpose of a simulation? It's to master something that is not known in a safe environment so that you understand how to use that before you get to the place where you really need it. Is it possible that you and I are living a reality here, learning about something, and we'll talk about what that something is? Are we learning something here in a relatively safe environment, given a period of time to do it, because we're going to need it somewhere else? Do you think that's a possibility? How does that feel to you? I mean, it's a bizarre concept, but how does it feel? Does it feel like maybe... Where have your spiritual and religious traditions said you're going to go when you finish here? Someplace else, right? And when you go there, the rules may be a little bit different. I began to ask the question, if we're here mastering an unknown, maybe how to use the language of the heart to create inner reality. Can you imagine what would happen if every thought, feeling, and emotion you had in every instant became manifest immediately? Wouldn't that be a pretty interesting world? I was reading some statistics. Do you know that for the average male... The average male in Western society has around 1,200 thoughts a day average, and if they're creative, it can go up to 20,000 thoughts a day. About 90% of those are sexual in nature. Can you imagine what would happen if they manifested immediately every time we had one of those? It'd be a pretty wild world. But even if it's not sexual in nature, can you imagine if every passing thought that you had became a reality, how confusing your life and your world would be? Is it possible that we're here learning about the power of thought, feeling, and emotion, isolating the possibilities, choosing what we would like to experience, and learning to breathe life into that, to manifest it in a physical reality, and learn it really well here because we're going to need it when we get someplace else? Do you think that's possible? Maybe. Well, I began to ask the question, if it's true, who would make such a simulation? And the next question is, who would benefit from it? Who would benefit from that? You answer me. Who would benefit? Is it possible that you and I have created the simulation so that we can learn something here that we're going to need somewhere else? You know that you're not even in this room, right? You know that there's a part of you that's somewhere else. You communicate with it all the time, whether you call it a higher self or an over-self or whatever it is. There's a part of you that's outside of this simulation somewhere, whatever it is. How does this concept feel to you? Is it a bizarre concept? Does it make sense? Okay, let's take a little further. This is a quote from 2006 Templeton Award laureate John Barrow from Oxford University. Quote, he says, it's long been recognized that technological civilizations only a little bit more advanced than ours will have the capacity to simulate entire universes in which entities can emerge and communicate with one another. He's asking the question, has it already happened? Has civilization already advanced to the point where this is happening and we are living in the result of that? Does it sound like we just took a big step out there somewhere? Well, signs of a virtual reality. How would you know? Would you even know if you were in a simulation? Would you know it? I mean, the whole idea, if you step into a flight simulator, the whole idea is it's so real, you feel like you're in the cockpit of a plane, right? Or I worked for Martin Marietta. We put probes on Mars. We built simulations for the Martian surface. In there, It's supposed to be like the real thing. If you didn't know, okay, let's just do it this way. How many Star Trek fans in here? Do you remember the episode? I didn't think I was going to do this, but I will. Do you remember the episode where, and I think this is Second Generation. What is the prime directive of Star Trek Second Generation? They're exploring the universe where nobody's ever been. However, what? They cannot interfere with any of those realities. You remember that? Okay, so they're out checking out a new universe like they always do every week. They find a solar system that's kind of like ours. It's got a sun that's kind of like ours. Lo and behold, there's a planet that's kind of like ours. But that planet never became technological. They were happy agricultural people, very cool, very healthy, very sweet. They had good families. Everything was cool. They had no way of knowing that in about 24 hours, their sun was going to explode into a supernova and microwave everything in the solar system. Okay, so the Enterprise is in a quandary here. Because those are humans, they want to save their lives, but they can't interfere. But not to worry, they come up with a very cool solution. Here's what they do. When everyone on the planet... You want to hear the story? Okay. When everyone on the planet goes to sleep, what they do is they beam everyone on the planet onto the holodeck of the Starship Enterprise, which has been made to look exactly like their planet. So when they wake up, they think they're still on their planet. They don't know that they're now hurtling through space a bajillion miles an hour on a starship. And the whole idea is the starship is going to take them to another place where there's another Earth-like planet that looks so much like theirs. When they go back to sleep, they're going to beam them down. They'll wake up on a safe planet. No one will ever know the difference. Because if all of a sudden the crew just materialized in front of them and they didn't have technology, they would make them into gods. They'd worship them, right? Has that ever happened around here before, do you think? Okay, it's a very, very good episode, and everything is going well. They beam the entire inhabitant population of the planet onto the Starship Enterprise. They're in the holodeck. It looks just like their planet. They wake up in the morning as if they'd had a dream, and they're walking around. Everything looks good. But you know, something always has to go wrong in these programs, right? Okay, the Starship has a power failure, and they can't hold the hologram in place any longer. And all of a sudden it starts to break down. And the people that were in the forest and in the rocks and the trees and the canyons, all of a sudden that hologram dissolves and disappears. And they're looking at fluorescent lights in the Starship Enterprise. And they're looking at all the people behind the scenes in one-piece tight leotards. These guys had never seen before, wondering where everybody came from. And then the whole episode becomes an episode of human sensitivity and honoring. And it's a very powerful, I get emotional when I see it. But I can't help but think maybe something real similar might be going on here. I believe that the world we're in, it's as real as we make it. What our science is showing us is that reality is malleable. It's soft. We can change it. And we change it through something that we are choosing to do inside of our bodies. So whether you're talking about the abundance in your checkbook or the healing of your body or the peace between nations or where we go in 2012 or what happens on 2013, all of that is up for grabs because you and I are choosing it right now. And we're waking up to the fact that we have the power to make those choices. Signs of virtual reality. How would you know? Here's what a virtual reality looks like. I went to a couple of different sites. Virtual realities have a beginning and an end. They start somewhere and they end somewhere. The users have a point where they begin and where they end. There are rules in a virtual reality, in a simulation. And the idea is that as you use them more and more, you get better and better at what you're doing. Like maybe relationships, like maybe feelings and emotions. In a virtual reality, the user is communicating with some form of themselves outside of the virtual reality. And there are choice points within the reality where they can change everything. Now this is how a virtual reality is defined. Does it sound familiar? Except for the context, it sounds a lot like what our most cherished and ancient spiritual traditions have always said, in a different language. There's a place where our universe began, whether we call it the Big Bang or in the beginning, somebody created it. It's got an end point, whether you call it the end of days or the last of days or whatever you want. It doesn't mean the world ends, it means the simulation ends. Users have a place where they come in and we leave. We're born and we die, or other things can happen. There are rules, and we call them the rules of physics as we're learning them, how we interact with our reality. We're supposed to get better at this stuff as we go along. We're communicating with something outside of our reality, whether we call it God or a higher self or angels or oversouls or whatever language you want to use. And there are choice points where we can jump from one possibility to another, except for the context. Doesn't it sound a lot like what we've been told for 5,000 years anyway? Maybe we are in a simulation, in a virtual reality. Nick Bostrom from Department of Philosophy, Oxford University, wrote a paper. There's no question what this paper's about. Look at the title. Are you living in a computer simulation? I'm going to save you the whole paper. He goes through some very complex mathematics. He uses those mathematics to come up with 3 possibilities. Only one of those 3 applies to what we're doing right here. And here's that third possibility. Number 3, we are almost certainly living in a computer simulation. The odds are greater that we are in a virtual reality than we're not, based on the mathematics of these papers. I'm going to invite you to check this out. Okay, I see people talking among yourselves, furrowed eyebrows. Are you okay with this? Does it work? Does anybody say, what the hell is he talking about? How do you feel about these things? You okay with this? It's going to be important in just a minute. It's going to be important. Whether it's real or not doesn't make any difference. It's going to be important in just a minute. Look at this. This is a quote. Seth Lloyd, MIT professor of programming. MIT professor. He was author of a book came out last year, Programming the Universe. He says that, quote, the history of the universe is, in effect, a huge and ongoing quantum computation. The universe is a quantum computer. He doesn't say it acts like or it's kind of like. He says it is a quantum computer. All right, if our universe is a virtual reality based in consciousness, in belief, how does it work? Let's go with this just for a minute, and then we're going to come back and do something with it. How does it work? Beliefs are binary. Would you agree with me that we either do or don't believe? You have a belief, it's either yes or no, right? Or it's off or on. When we believe, yes or no, off or on, we're having a feeling in our heart, electrical and magnetic fields that are changing the stuff our world is made of, right? Beliefs are binary. We either believe and create atoms, or we don't believe and there's no atom. Beliefs, binary. Yes, no, here, not there. Atom, no atom. The physical universe, from this perspective, is nothing more and nothing less than the beliefs that are on, and you're going to see an example in just a minute of how quickly you can turn a belief off and the atoms will disappear in response to that. The patterns of what we believe, those fields become the atoms of nature. We don't know if this is true or not. This is being seriously considered by people that you would be amazed to know are considering this. There's a whole workshop in there. The question, are we living a virtual reality? Is it a fact or is it a metaphor? Doesn't make any difference. And here's why. Either way, if it is truly what's happening, if it's not, it's a really good way to start the conversation. If it's a fact or it's a metaphor, here's why I'm even sharing it with you today. If you know the code, either way, fact or metaphor, if you know the code, you choose your own limits. And that's why I'm sharing it with you today. If you know the code of how this physical universe works, then you choose the limits of what's possible and what's not for you in your life. And it's not fairy tale and it's not make-believe, although there are fairy tales about this. It changes everything. It means every one of us has a vote. It means our future right now is up for grabs. I've done some very interesting programs in the last few months. Some of them have been in the D.C. area. You never know who's going to come to a D.C., Arlington, Virginia program. We've had government folks in there, and what they say is, there was a time we believed that somebody had a handle on everything, and something has gone awry. And we're here asking the same questions you all are asking. What's up? What's going on? They're asking the same questions. Something is changing right now. Electronic computers are based in numbers. You all know that. Underneath everything you type in your computer, you've got ones and zeros. They're programmed by numbers. Our consciousness computer is programmed by belief. So you can see the parallel. In an electronic computer, if your program has a glitch, you create something called a software patch. Have you all heard of a patch before? Remember the famous Y2K patch? All the clocks were going to stop at midnight, and they sent out a little piece of software. That was the patch that changed everything. If we're using this as an analogy in our consciousness program, if we're going to fix a glitch in consciousness, maybe we were never meant to come here to live in the fear and the pain and the suffering. Do you think that's the reason we're here? I don't either. I think it's a glitch in consciousness. And if it's a glitch and belief is the program, then what's the patch? The patch is to change the way we see our world, the miracle patch. That's where the title of this program. They asked me to come up with a title 6 months ago. I didn't know what I was going to be talking about. So I had to come up with a title for the program that I thought I might be offering at 2 o'clock this morning when I put it all together. So, how do we transcend those limits of belief? Well, the ancient instructions were shared throughout every spiritual tradition of the world, including ours. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, they were lost 1,700 years ago. And I know this is no news to most people in here, that 45 books were either completely edited or they were taken out altogether from what became our Western biblical text. 45 books, 20 were completely edited, another 25 were edited, condensed, and rearranged. We know this because we found those books in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Nag Hammadi Library, in the Coptic libraries of Egypt. We lost them in our culture. Other traditions haven't lost them. And that's, for me, the value. People have asked me, Greg, why go to these places in the world that are so low-tech when we live in this high-tech world? What can we possibly learn from these ancient traditions and ancient cultures? And I said, you know what, we can learn a lot. I was an engineer with security clearance working on the Peacekeeper missile during the Cold War, and I was taking trips to Egypt. And they don't like you going to Egypt a lot when you have a security clearance. They said, well, once is a vacation. How come you're going there time after time after time? Well, this is the reason why, whether we're and I'm showing a lot of these images from Nepal and Tibet, but it's from all over the world, because these people have a wisdom today that we lost, and it mirrors what our own science is saying. These are all holy people that have devoted their lives to the understanding that they can create something in their bodies that changes their world. And it's the way they live their lives. Don't they look like a lot of fun to hang out with? There is a man, this man right here, anytime the ladies on our trip disappear, when we're in Nepal, I never worry, I know where to find them because they're all drawn to this beautiful man right here. He's a fascinating man. But this guy is my favorite. Doesn't he look like a very intense kind of guy? He's covered with cremation ashes, but this next image tells the whole story. Wait till you see this mischievous little grin that he gets on his face. Look at that. Doesn't he look like he knows something that you'd like to know? The reason I'm sharing this with you is you don't have to go to another part of the world. You don't have to live the life of the yogi or an ascetic. Although, this guy chose to. And just to orient you, this is the heels of his feet above his head from this yogi that is sitting here. Look at the intensity of his face. First thing he said was, don't take my picture. I didn't, but somebody else did, so I'm borrowing their picture. The whole idea is you don't have to live this life of extreme to understand and practice what they know. This is the path that they've chosen. But there are other places, like this monastery in Tibet. The only way to get up there is through these horses. I know you all have heard about Tibetan men. You see pictures of the men all the time. Very, very powerful images of the men. You don't often get to see the ladies. And I wanted to see some of the beautiful, beautiful ladies in this part of the world. Do you see one that's really special on here? I talk about her in some of the workshops. How old do you think she is? Tibetans don't track their age, first of all. If you ask them how old they are, the first thing you do is giggle. Because it's not important. But they know what year they were born and they know what year this is. And this lady is well in advance of 120. I'm going to show you a film in a few minutes. The man that took the film died last year at 151 years old. And this isn't unusual in this part of the world. It's not unusual. Because they think about things and they don't track their age. So every year they don't say, oh, I'm another year older, and their body chemistry doesn't respond to them getting another year older. But look at these beautiful ladies. You don't get to see them very often, and I really want to honor the feminine energy as well as the male energy in preserving the knowledge and the wisdom that we're sharing. Now, I'm showing different trips. Those were from 2005. This was back in 1998. I'm going to do this quickly. 1998 was the first time we had the opportunity to be in this monastery. My hair was a little darker then. And, okay, a little longer. But it was in this place where we met these beautiful young monks, and they asked if they could chant prayers of peace for us, if they could chant prayers of peace. What are we going to say? No. I said, you bet. And we finished. I always carry a native flute, a cedar flute, and we did prayers of peace back for them. And I saw, look at the look on his face. What do you think he's thinking? He's thinking, sweet flute. I'd love to have one of those. So we did. We gave this to him. He was a very happy man, taught him to play. He was playing this flute in no time. And the whole thing, they did their chants. They want us to chant back. We quickly learned as a group that we didn't know any songs to chant together. And the only song we all knew together was Old MacDonald. Okay, but the words didn't make any sense. So we changed the words. We did a yak, yak here, yak, yak there. They didn't get it at all. It sounded silly to them. But the part that they got, I'll do my best morning voice here to do this. The part they got was the refrain, because they have this tremendous ear for rhythm. So when we got to the refrain, the part that they really liked was the part that went, E-I-E-I-O. So that little chant traveled faster than we did through Tibet, and they would meet us at the subsequent monasteries chanting E-I-E-I-O before we ever got there. But the reason I'm sharing this is because it opened the camaraderie that led us to the library that you all saw yesterday. And it was in this library where we found these books. And it was in these books where they have records of the things that were lost in our traditions. But the pages look like they would fall apart if you touch them, don't they? And they do. They're almost worthless. But what we know is for every one of these pages, there's a wooden block that was carved to make that page. So they shared that library with us as well. This is a library of the wooden blocks. Each block has the name of the book. See, these are all the same up here. That's the name. This is the chapter. Everyone's different, and this is the page. And they pulled out one of these, and these blocks of wood will last for thousands of years. They're made from a wood called ironwood. So they pull these out, they ink them up. The block, they lay a piece of paper, they roll over that block, and voila, you've got a brand new page from a 1,500-year-old book. I asked them to do this so I could share it with you today. And they're almost the same thing that we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Nag Hammadi Library. What do they say? Bottom line, everything's connected through a field. We now know that. Feeling and belief speaks to that field. We know that. But we're just arriving at this understanding. This is their culture. This is where they begin. It's where they've been for 1,500 years. This was the man, the beautiful man that I met in 1998. He's the abbot of this monastery. And it was this man, I asked the question, when we see your prayers for 14 and 16 hours a day, when we see the mudras and the mantras and the bells and the bowls and the gongs and the chimes and the incense, when we see your prayers on the outside, what's happening on the inside? And this is the man, very, very clearly, that said to me, you've never seen our prayers. Because a prayer cannot be seen. He said, what you see are the things that we do to create the feeling in our bodies. The feeling is the prayer. The feeling is the prayer. Okay, you tell me, where does feeling occur? And what is the heart? What role does the heart play energetically in your body? It's the strongest what? Electrical and magnetic resonator in your body. Generator in your body. If you're feeling in your heart, you're changing electrical and magnetic waves. It's changing the stuff around you. And he's telling us precisely this. The key is to feel from the outcome as if. If you're going to create in that world, you've got to give the field something to work with. Not that you're going to get to the healing or get to the peace. Our conditioning is that these things take a long time, a long, slow, arduous process of beginning to start the process of the path of eventual recovery to whatever it is that we're working for. Quantum physics doesn't work that way. Man, when there's a quantum change, what do we call it? It's a quantum leap. It happens like that. We come from the place it's already done. And this is what they're saying. Feel as if your prayer is already answered. Your body is already healed. Your perfect relationship is already here. That peace is already present. And when you do that, you'll change the cells of your body and you'll change the atoms of your world. And if we are truly living in a virtual reality, maybe this is what we came here to do. It's a different language. Maybe it's time to update our story. Maybe we've outgrown the 5,000-year-old story. When we're looking at cell phones and computers and the internet, maybe there's no wonder there's a disconnect between that and our ancient spiritual heritage, because maybe we've outgrown the language. The principles are there, same principles, but maybe we need a new language to describe that. Okay, you okay with everything we've done in here so far? Does it make sense? Feeling as if. We're not finished. But I want to make sure that we're good up to this point. What I'd like to do is give you a very potent example. Some of you may have seen this, some have never seen it. If you have seen it, you have a new context within which to look at this. What we've done is we've laid the foundation of possibilities. We've given the academics. If you were with me yesterday, as many of you were, you've seen some of the science. It was early morning. I didn't want to do a lot of the science because at 9:30 last night I hit the delete button on my computer and redid the whole program. So now what I'd like to do is share something that takes all of that out of the realm of academics. Because if you actually see it applied, if you see a demonstration of what it is we're talking about, then you must do one of two things. You either, in your mind, say, well, the whole thing's a hoax, and I'm going to go to my next program and hope they're not talking about virtual realities. Or you readjust the way you think about yourself and your world to accommodate what it is that you've seen. So this is the first DVD that I'm about to begin the process of start talking about. So I'm asking you to not start it, but to prepare the process to begin to start, because you wanted a heads up for when we go. Okay, that was secret code to our AV guy. The images you're going to see they're not professional images. They were done by hand in a medicineless hospital in Beijing, China. It's a medicineless hospital. It's almost an oxymoron. It is a place unlike anything you see here in the West. I have yet to see one of these here in the West. What is about to happen is, this is one example, but they do this all the time. This isn't a one-shot deal. I don't want you to think it's just a one-time only. There's a woman who's gone to Western medical doctors. They've diagnosed her with an inoperable bladder cancer, and they said, we can't help you. There's nothing we can do. They said, be comfortable to the end of your days. She said, well, thanks for your opinion. I'm going to go someplace else. She now is at a medicineless hospital. She has learned about her body, and she's learned many of the principles that we're talking about right now. She's learned new life-affirming ways to nourish her body, to move her body in gentle life-affirming ways to stimulate the electrical and the magnetic fields in her body. She's learned new ways to believe, new ways to breathe the breath of life, deep life-affirming breaths with her diaphragm out. I like that when I say that, and I hear people going, I say, oh, good audience, good audience. And at some point, it makes sense to undergo what she is about to undergo. I'm going to answer some of your questions right now. The woman is awake. She's conscious. She believes in the process that is happening. She has prepared her body with life-affirming actions, such as the ones I just described. Through a sonogram, through an ultrasound, we can look at her body while 3 practitioners are doing all the things I just shared. They aren't touching her. They are feeling the feeling as if the woman is already healed. Now, this is powerful. They're not judging her cancer is right or wrong or good or bad. They're saying it's a possibility because everything is possible. They're saying it's one possibility. They're not saying you got to go away or we're going to cut you out or radiate you. They're saying it's one possibility, and now they're saying we know the language to choose a new possibility, and they're feeling the feeling of what it feels like to be in the presence of a woman who is fully healed, already enabled, fully capacitated. It's already happened in real time, in 2 minutes and 40 seconds, on the computer screen of the sonogram. You can see that change mirrored in her body. Her atoms will respond that quickly. And to many people, I've shown this in many medical organizations, they say it's a miracle. It's only a miracle until you understand what happens. And then what is it? It's a technology. But it's not a woo-woo area. There's no really cool music happening and the light doesn't shimmer and there's no, nothing weird rainbows in the room or anything. It's just the way things seem to work. And they do this all the time. And I'm going to let the video go to the end because they'll give themselves an applause. They'll say, good for this woman. They have a 95% success rate after 5 years if people will do what they're trained to do afterward, life-affirming lifestyle. And then they'll say next, and another one comes in. They do this all the time because it's part of their culture and they allow for it. And I'm going to ask for no audio at first. Bring the audio down. They're going to begin a chant. And there's no magic in this chant. The chant is a word that they have agreed upon that reinforces for them the feeling. So it could be any word. So here's the woman. She's awake. She's conscious. There's her little tummy. You want to bring the audio down, please? All the way down. Okay, on the left-hand side is a reference image, freeze frame. The black is the emptiness inside her bladder. There's the lump right there. That's the tumor. Now they're taking a snapshot. A moment in time, for reference, the right side, now the image is coming up real time. If you're trained in ultrasound and you think this might be a hoax, look at the floor of the bladder and watch the registration marks, and you see they don't change. That's how you know it's not a hoax. Okay, if you go ahead and bring the audio up so you can listen to the chant. And they're saying, wah, sa, wah, sa. It roughly translates into the words already done. It's already happened. It's already healed. Watch the right side of the screen. Watch the right side of the screen. So the left is reference, the right is real time. This is her body right now. Saying, gone, 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 gone. Okay, will you hit pause, please? I'm going to ask our AV, can you hit pause one more time? Let's see if we can toggle the bar. One more time. Una más, por favor. Well, I guess that's where it is. Okay, well, you get the idea. The tumor's gone. Some of you have seen it, some have never seen it. How do you feel when you see something like that? Is it meaningful to you at all? Do you feel that you have to go halfway around the world to have an experience like this if you wanted to do this? You don't. That's the reason I'm sharing this. You have everything that you need in your body, and you have all the wisdom of how our reality works. All that we are required to do is now have the understanding that allows us to believe in this possibility, to allow it to happen in our lives. Now, I'm sharing this with one woman. This is changing the life of one woman. They're feeling the feeling as if the outcome, whatever it is, has already happened. The same principle I shared yesterday applies for a large geographic area. People that were trained to feel peace during the Israeli-Lebanese war. When they felt peace, all that happened was peace. We've done this with Princeton University on the Global Consciousness Project, and we've seen those little eggs that we saw yesterday that show human consciousness all over the world. We've seen that respond. So it's the same principle, that whether you're talking about personal healing, global peace, personal abundance, your personal relationships, joy in your life, whatever it is, it's the same principle. Okay, go ahead and let this finish, please. Okay, so you can see that tumor is gone, and that was 2 minutes and 40 seconds, real time. But I want you to see what they do next. They give themselves a hand. So how do you feel when you see something like it? Is it meaningful to you at all? Was that a miracle or was it a technology? It's a very powerful internal technology. It's a technology that you were born with, the power to communicate with the stuff your body and this universe is made of. Doesn't it make perfect sense that it would be that way? I mean, honestly, doesn't it? Whether we are living in a simulation, a virtual reality, the real thing, it's irrelevant. If you know the code, you choose the limits. And I think what's happening is that we have placed ourselves in the position where we've created in the world around us the conditions that are forcing us to come to terms with our reality. We must think about our world differently. We must think about our bodies differently because we're creating conditions that we simply won't survive if we don't do that. And the power to do precisely that is what happens when we ask ourselves, who are we? Who are we? I'll tell you who we are, is that we are reality makers. That's who we are. The key is we can make only what we believe, and the power to do that's a power that truly lives in every single one of us. Every one of us. So as you go to all of the programs and all the wisdom and the brilliant minds and beautiful hearts of all the people who are here today, I'm just so honored to be sharing this conference with every one of them. My prayer is that this offers a bit of a context, kind of a global context, and everything everybody's saying fits in here somewhere because they're all giving us tools to know how we do these things, how we become in our hearts the things that we choose to experience in our lives. And that's where I'm going to end today. You've all heard this before. The bottom line to all of this is that you don't have to know any of it. The monasteries in Tibet, those monks and nuns, they don't need to know any of this stuff because they were born accepting it. In our left brain minds, we need a reason to think of things differently. The key is that we must literally become in our hearts the things that we'd like to experience in our world. And in that way, we are those reality makers. That's where I'm going to end. Thank you. I'm going to share some new science. We're going to have the opportunity to go back into Tibet to a different monastery and see different monks, different abbots. We're learning about a language that has no words. It's the nonverbal language of the human heart that has been referenced in a poetic sense for a very long time. But now our own science is telling us that the heart, your heart, from the moment you take your first breath in this world, your heart begins to commune. And I'm going to be really clear about this word. Do you know that the word prayer does not exist in the ancient Jewish, the ancient Christian, or any of the texts prior to 1700 years ago? There is no word prayer. The word prayer is an artifact of human interpretation, human intervention. When you go back into the original texts and you retranslate, whether we're talking about the Sumerian or the Aramaic or the original Hebrew, the word prayer does not exist. Do you know what word they use? It's a beautiful word. Commune. Doesn't it have a different feel than prayer? When we're praying to something or someone or a being or an entity, to me that feels very different than communing, having a communion with the forces of this world. So we're learning about this language that we speak. Every moment of every day, you're having a conversation with the stuff, the literal field of energy that holds this universe together. You're communing with that field right this minute. And the question is, do you know what you're saying? Well, the answer to that is in the world around you. It's in your checkbook. It's what your balance looks like. It's in your relationships, in your workplace, in your intimate relationships, your friends, your family. It's in the success of your heart's desire. All of those things are the field answering the communication and the conversation that you've been sharing for a lifetime. And from the perspective of the ancients, there really isn't a right, wrong, good, or bad. It's just about us recognizing that we're in this feedback loop. There's a feedback mechanism out there, and if we don't like what we're seeing, we're given the tools to change that. And that's really important right now. Really important right now, because we found yesterday, if you were not with us yesterday, a large part of our morning was talking about why it seems that the world is changing so very, very quickly right now. I asked for a show of hands in the room yesterday. There were about 600 people in the room, and almost everybody said, man, it feels like something big is happening. It is. And the experts are telling us that something big is happening. It's not our imagination. And the reason it's happening is because you and I are living this rare convergence of great cycles of time, unlike anything ever seen in 5,000 years of recorded human history. Now, our own scientists within the last couple of years have just begun to understand that where Earth and our solar system is located in an orbit around the center of our great Milky Way galaxy. It's called the Great Central Sun. I know you've heard of that before if you study ancient texts. Where we are in our journey around that source of energy at the center of the Milky Way determines in large part what happens on this planet. It determines things like climate change, weather patterns, whether or not the sea levels are high or low, whether or not the ice caps are frozen or melted, whether or not it snows in North Dakota in July, whether or not we can grow food in Colombia in September. Colombia, South America. I was born in Missouri. It's not Columbia, Missouri, for you Missourians in here. It determines all of those things, but even more than that, it determines great leaps in spiritual growth on this planet. Because when the world changes, you and I have to change to accommodate that change. We've got to change our lives to accommodate whatever's happening on the earth. Well, that's what's happening right now. Why are all these things happening right now? What we found yesterday is that you and I, we're living the end of a 5,000-year-long cycle. If you're taking notes, it's actually 5,125 years. And it's interesting because this cycle happens to coincide with human history as we know it today. So these great cycles of time determine, in large part, what happens on our planet and how we respond. This 5,125-year-long world age is what it's called. Happens to coincide. Everything we know is recorded human history happened in this cycle. Now, our belief systems and our science in the past, they believe this is all there was. They think that the beginning of human history was 5,000 years ago. But what the ancients said is that's just the beginning of this cycle. There was another cycle before that. And there was another cycle before that. And now our archaeologists are beginning to find the evidence that bears that out. Now, I mentioned this yesterday. I'm going to say it right now because this is why you and I are living such a rare, precious moment in the history of this planet. In the cycles of the past, when the world changes, people choose to respond to that change in one of two ways. If they see the world change and the things that are familiar disappearing, they will fight one another, violent competition, to try to keep everything as it was in the way that they're comfortable. And in the last cycle, 5,000 years ago, that is the way human civilization chose to respond. And the war was so bad that nobody won. And they were forgotten for 5,000 years until the archaeologists began to recover the remnants of their civilization. I talk about this in the new book. But there are other cycles where we have chosen, I say we because I asked my audiences yesterday, most people believe we've been here before. You think we've been here before? All right, well, and I think that's what we're all sensing now. That something big is happening. We want to get it right. We want to do it well. There are other civilizations that work together. The cycle that we're living right now, this time of change, what the records show is that it is a very intense period of time, but it's brief. It will only last about this generation. It'll be over in a few years. And then the world will be as it is going to be for the next cycle. But we're the generation that bridges these two ways of being. What do you think the chances are of being on this planet at precisely the time when we end one way of being and begin the next? When we end a 5,125-year-long world age that happens to coincide with the end of another cycle that's about 26,000 years long, that happens to coincide with us crossing the equator that separates the top from the bottom of our Milky Way galaxy. All three cycles are converging right now. So if it feels like a special time in the history of this planet, it is. And these are the reasons why. This is what we did yesterday. We said that these world age changes, they bring changes in the planet, magnetic fields, climate, sea levels, and resources. And when those things change, cycles of war and peace are directly related to this. That's all the big stuff. It comes right down to our everyday lives, the way you and I feel about ourselves, our bodies, our relationship to the world, our relationship to one another. Political cycles, economic cycles, they're all linked to these global cycles. So the crash in the economy, if we knew how to read the cycles, it wouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. Those that know the cycles knew that crash was coming. They didn't know the magnitude, but they knew it was happening. And they knew it was happening the last time because it works in cycles. Our spiritual growth is linked to these cycles, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Our spiritual growth. We talked yesterday about 3 discoveries that change everything in terms of the way we think of our lives and our world. The first of these is that when I was in school, when you were in school, if your kids are in school right now, the science classes are teaching them that the space between things is empty. That the space between you and me, that there's nothing there. When you look at the nucleus of an atom and that first electron, that the space in between is empty. It's flat out wrong. But we have an entire civilization based on the belief that everything's separate from everything else. And that what happens in one place has no effect on what happens somewhere else. We've built our lives that way. It's wrong. The second discovery is that our inner experiences, your experience, we're going to work with these before you leave here today. Your inner experiences of thought, feeling, emotion, belief, heart-based thought, feeling, emotion, and belief, speak to the stuff that holds everything together. You communicate with the stuff that holds this world together. And it goes so far, we've even found that human emotion is so powerful that on 9/11, when the world watched the unfolding of what was happening in the United States on that day, our satellites, 222 miles above the surface of the Earth, were picking up the changes in human heart fields of the magnetic fields of the Earth and relaying that information back to scientists every 30 minutes. That was the chart you saw yesterday, and we talk about it in the new book. It was the first time scientists said, my God, we really are linked. We really are part of all that is. The satellites in space are picking up the magnetic fields of human hearts. So, I want to begin this morning. My man brain, when I hear things like this, I want to believe that we're all one. I want to believe that everybody's related. I want to believe that those fields are out there, but I need to see it. Because we've all been told that we're one, and we've all been told that we're related. And I've been in so many workshops, I know many of you have as well. People say that. How many workshops have you been in where you go in and the speaker says, you're a powerful being? And you write down, I'm a powerful being. And you know what I'm talking about. Then you are connected to all that is. Okay, I'm connected to all that is. You are one with all beings. You are one with all beings. Take a deep breath. Visualize yourself by a bubbling brook and feel that oneness. And then you get up and go to lunch. And how real is it? So the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, I'll just tell you a little bit. I was born a Cancerian male. Anybody know about Cancerians? Cancerians live in the world of emotion. Well, I'm a double Cancerian. And depending on how you run the charts, I've got 6 planets in the 12th house, and every one of them is in Cancer. So my world is about emotion. That's the only reason I'm saying that to you. And to tame that, my man brain had to learn a way to negotiate those emotions. And what I've found for myself, and I think this works for a lot of people, is if we give our left brain, our logical brain, something to work with, once it is quelled and satisfied, it will step out of the way and let us move into our hearts. I work that way, and I think many of you probably do as well. So I'm going to honor the way that I believe we learn, our left brain, our right brain, our hearts. I wanted to see how real this field was. Well, your tax dollars are paying for a satellite. You've probably never even seen the results of what this satellite has found. So I want to share this a little bit with you. How many have heard of the Shandra X-ray Observatory? About 6 people. Your tax dollars are paying for this amazing piece of equipment orbiting the Earth called the Shandra X-ray Observatory. I would think that every one of you would have a beautiful hardbound book of all the Shandra images that have been captured over the years. You don't? I do. I'm just going to share one of them with you now. Okay, now this is interesting because scientists believe that the space between things is empty. That's what's been taught. Look at the NASA mission statement for Chandra. To detect invisible fields of energy in, quote, empty space, unquote. So our own scientists are saying maybe it's not so empty. Maybe there's something up there. Okay, so here's what Chandra is doing. First of all, you all heard of the Hubble Space Telescope, right? Okay, this image is from the Hubble Space Telescope. Where these arrows are is the center of the universe, not the Milky Way, but the universe where scientists believe everything began with a Big Bang a long time ago. That's a male-oriented term. It was a male scientist that called the beginning of the entire universe the Big Bang. You know that. His name was Fred Hoyle. It was 1951. I know that because when I asked female scientists, what would you call the beginning of the entire universe? They say, well, we wouldn't call it the Big Bang. They said we'd call it something like the first dawn of the new breath, of the new beginning. But we got a guy out there in 51, and we're looking at the Big Bang, and it happened right here, okay? Okay, so this is what Hubble Space Telescope is seeing with the naked eye. This is what you could see if you had the vantage point of Hubble. There's no special equipment going on here. Okay? And what I'd like for you to see from this is see how these galaxies, they're a little fuzzy around the edges, but they're pretty much separate from one another, aren't they? I mean, this is separate from this. This is separate from this. Okay, now, the Chandra telescope is looking at the same place, but it's using special equipment that can see the, quote, empty space and the invisible fields. Now, don't blink because you're going to miss this. So the next image you see is what Shandra sees looking at the center of the universe and see if everything still looks separate from everything else. Isn't that beautiful? I remember when I first saw that, the first thing I thought of it felt to me like a web or a net, which is precisely the way the ancients described the field that holds everything together. The Hopi talk about spider grandmother weaving the web of creation, or the Hindu traditions talk about the great god Indra wove her web in a faraway abode so that we could have this world. You know, and there are some empty places over here. But if you look through another lens, those places are filled in as well. If you look at a composite, it looks like a big mass of stuff. There's no empty space in the universe. And this applies down to the level of the atom. Everything in the atom is connected. We are all part of this massive, vibrating, pulsating, illuminating field of energy. And we're only learning about what it means for us to communicate with this field. Does it help to see that? You'll think about that a lot. It helped me to see it as well. Okay, I don't like to talk about my material from the stage, but people were asking me yesterday, if you want to know more about the field that connects everything, The Divine Matrix is the book that tells you that. If you want to know about the language that communicates with that field, The Spontaneous Healing of Belief is where that material is. If you want to know about the cycles of time and what it means to us, in March of this next year, this new book will be out, Fractal Time, and that is what that is all about. And that's all I'm going to say about those. But now you don't have to ask me. All right. Thank you. So the key to all of this that we're talking about, how do we relate to our world? We find that key in a non-scientific language in some of our most cherished spiritual and ancient traditions, like this beautiful Tibetan tapestry that is actually called the Heart Sutra from the Mahayana Buddhist traditions. It's about the 1st century. This is a direct quote. A single sentence, you can't get much clearer than this. It says, quote, reality exists only where we create a focus. A focus. You and I are learning how to focus an energy through the way we feel about our world. It's not what we verbalize. It's not what we command. It's the way we feel the world in our heart. That focus is important because it leads to what is called the great spiritual mystery. We began talking about this yesterday. That says that there's a focus we create in consciousness that triggers a process inside of our bodies. It interacts with the forces of creation. It affects our physical world. This is the key. A focus we create in consciousness affects our bodies and our world. When I was an engineer working in the defense industry during the 80s, and I learned this, I said, man, I want to know about that focus. I want to know how to do that. I want to know what that's all about. And it's an ongoing process. How do we go about doing these things? Well, modern science is just now arriving at the understandings where those ancient traditions began. Modern science is just catching up. It's so interesting to me to see how this is working. Because modern science, there actually is an experiment that's going on right now. If you want to look this up on the internet, the very prestigious journal Nature, volume 446, April 2007. I'm saying it in the mic, so now it's on the recording. There's an ongoing experiment. Nature is reporting on where that experiment stands right now. The bottom line, the scientists are asking a question that sounds more like a question out of Philosophy 101 in first year of college. Do we create the world by looking at it? That's the question the scientists are asking. So they have this ongoing experiment. Now, I'm going to save you. I felt that this is probably a bottom line group, right? I felt you this morning. I said, man, these guys want to get to the bottom line of this whole thing. So I'll save you all the details, and I'll just cut to the chase. Do we create the world by looking at it? This journal of Nature says right now, it looks like the answer is yes. They said it's not enough just to allow for us to be connected to one another to account for the results that are being seen in the experiment. Something else is happening. The people in the experiments are actually creating and rearranging the atoms of their physical reality in these experiments. This is going to change everything. This is the stuff that changes everything that's very, very similar to the great secret of our past. Almost every major spiritual tradition has said exactly the same thing. Whether you're talking about the healing of your body, the healing of the bodies of your loved ones, peace at your family dinner table, peace in your community, peace between nations, abundance in your checkbook, success in your careers. as different as all of those sound from one another, they're all part of this same principle, the way we feel and the feelings that we create. This is where we're going to go with this. We're going to go into the Tibetan monasteries in a little while and understand how they do it. And then we're going to do it in this room before we leave. Then we're going to go out and be fruitful and multiply and change the world, because it's a great deluxe one-weekend Phoenix Celebrate Your Life 2008 conference. All right. I wanted to share this with you. For those yesterday, we saw a miraculous healing. We saw the video of a cancerous tumor disappear inside the body of a living woman through an ultrasound in less than 3 minutes in response to something that the practitioners were doing. They were having a feeling in their hearts, and her body responded. Many of you saw that. Some of you didn't. So I'm going to share a different kind of healing here today. It's another before and after. But my question was, you all have seen these before. You've seen before and after miraculous things on YouTube and all that. What makes this different, I wouldn't even show this to you, except for one reason. What makes this different is we're going to look at the healing of a woman in the lower part of the screen as a series of still images. And then we're going to go back in the upper part of the screen and look at the brain state of the person doing the healing as it corresponds to what happens in the woman's body. Does that sound like a cool thing to do? Okay, I don't have any young people in my life. When I say cool, I've been corrected lately, and I understand the word is sweet. So does that sound like a sweet thing to do? Actually, there's another word that now supersedes sweet, but I don't like the new word, so I'm going to stay with sweet and cool. To me, this is the value. I said, the healings are cool, but I want to see what's happening in the brain that triggers that experience. Are you okay if we do this? Yes. Scientists have discovered that healing and peace between nations, there's a direct relationship here. They happen in the same brain state that we dream in, where we are not attached to the outcome. That's interesting. It's like when we want something to happen, that may be the very thing that stands between us and the fruition of our heart's desire. So, this isn't the clearest image, but I know you're going to be able to see what's happening. This is a scan. It's a thermal scan of a body of a 19-year-old woman. I was just on tour in Japan a couple of months ago. This was done at the Japanese university. What you're looking at, there's a little chart on the side, and I think you can see it. Can you see it in the back by the door? Can you see the colors okay? These colors indicate how much activity, primarily energetic and blood-based activity, the blood carries an energy, and all of those are being measured, are happening in different parts of the body. Red is up at the top. That means it's really cooking. Blue is at the bottom. It means not much is happening. So some places you'd want to see a lot. Like here's the heart. You'd want to see a lot of activity there, you assume. Lungs, brain. But look at this right here. That is the activity from a massive ovarian cyst on a 19-year-old Japanese woman. Okay? So here is how this works. She comes into a room and she's standing on one side of a partition. On the other side of the partition, the healer comes in. They have never met. There is no verbal communication. They don't speak. The healer doesn't know if it's a man, if it's a woman, doesn't know the nationality, doesn't know that there's an ovarian tumor, doesn't know the age. No communication. And here's what happens. At time equals 0, right there, this is when the healer comes in. The healer isn't doing anything but evaluating. You would call it empathing. I'm going to have to ask that you not take pictures because I made a promise that I wouldn't have these duplicated in any way. You can have that one, but if you'd help me keep my promises, this is going to be really important when we go into Tibet. Please help me honor the privacy of our monks and nuns and our friends. You okay with that? Can we do it that way? They said that Mishka said that I could show the images if they weren't recorded. Otherwise, I have to pull them, and it's no fun for the program. So this is the body of the woman. Time equals 0. She's sitting in the room. Okay, the healer comes in and he's evaluating, he's empathing. Now, look at what happens. 3 minutes into the healing, that tumor is going away. 7 minutes into the healing, it's essentially gone. Now, I wouldn't even show that to you because I know you've all seen these things before. But let's look at the brain state. Let's see what the healer is doing. This is so cool. This image on the top, you're looking down on the crown of the healer. Her nose is, and it is a female. It's a female healer, by the way. Her nose is pointed to the top, and the same colors apply in her brain on this chart right over here. So let me ask you the first question. Here is the healer. She's come into the room. She's evaluating. Do you see a differentiation between her left and her right brain? Yes or no? Do you see much of a differentiation? Some say yes, some say no. The answer is no. There's really not much differentiation here. Pretty much, this is a whole brain experience. Let me ask you another question. On this scale from red to blue, is her brain highly active or not very active? Exactly. And this is going to be the point of the whole thing. Whatever it is that's happening within this healer that facilitates a healing in 7 minutes, it's not happening in a brain. And you're going to see this. It tells the whole story. So right now, this healer's brain is relatively inactive, and there's really no differentiation between the left and the right brain. 3 minutes into the healing, let's take a look and see. Now, do you see a differentiation between left and right brain? Now you have a better idea of what I'm asking. Can you see it now? Okay, but what is the differentiation? Which side of the brain is starting to become more active? Is it the left brain? Is it the man brain that likes to tell things how to happen? That engineers our world? No, it's not. Look at this. The right brain's starting to cook up. Right here, it's gone from the blue past into the green, into the yellows. But this is interesting. The left brain is still relatively inactive, and parts of it right here, what color is that right there? White. Where is white on the scale? It's not. Parts of the left brain are becoming off the scale inactive. This is not a left brain process. If there's any doubt, look at this one. Now what's happening? This right brain's cooking, right? And it's correlating with the healing. While this tumor is being healed, look at what's happening in the brain of the healer. Her right brain is cooking, but look at her left brain. It's so inactive, it's off the scale inactive. It doesn't even show up, and then here it is through the finish. Look at this. And this tells the whole story. This is why I'm sharing it with you. I know it's not the clearest image, but I know you get what's going on here. This tells the whole story. I'm going to, your little piece of homework, just for a couple of minutes, if you can remember this image right here. You're going to see it again in just a minute in different context. Okay, so that's can you kind of remember what the shape of that looks like? Okay. Well, you don't have to tell me now. but you just did. You were right. Okay. This tells the whole story. What is happening in this healing, whatever it is that's occurring, it is a right brain intuitive experience. There's an experience that is happening in the body of the healer. Remember, a focus that we create in consciousness affects our physical world. The healer is creating a focus in consciousness, and now we're looking at her brain to help us understand how it's happening. And it's not happening in the brain. Her brain is triggering another experience in her body that's linked with intuition, with feeling. And that's precisely what you're going to find when we go into this monastery in Tibet. It's exactly what you're going to see. All right. Does that make sense to you? Isn't that interesting? All right. Now, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to go back and look at those NASA images again. And I think you're going to be really, I hope you're as excited about, even if you're not excited, will you please act like you are so I feel good about what I did, because this is such a very cool correlation that I'm going to share with you here. Okay, NASA has another satellite your tax dollars are paying for, called the COBE or COBE. It's pronounced both ways. How many of you have the beautiful hardbound version of your COBE satellite photographs on your bedstand for light bedtime reading? Okay, 2 of us. So this tax dollars paid for something useful. All right, COBE or COBE is imaging the radiation that's left over from the moment our universe began. So with the Big Bang, there was a release of energy, and there are remnants of that energy still out there. And the signs are saying if we can map where that energy is, it gives us an idea of the shape of our universe. Okay, and they're looking at different wavelengths, it's like looking through different glasses, different lenses. Okay, so this is the first image you're going to see are all the wavelengths together. It's the composite wavelength. And this is what our universe looks like right now. This is the entire universe. It looks kind of cool. There's a lot we could talk about here. You know, there are many places in this program where one image we could talk about for the rest of the morning. And this is one of those places, but we're not going to because we're going somewhere. This is a cool image. And you see a little bit of a shape on here, but we're going to look at a different wavelength now. And if there are any numerologists, if you're a scientist or an engineer, this is the 53 gigahertz wavelength. But if you're not, and you don't care about that, if you're a numerologist, 5 and 3 is the number 8. It's God's number. So you can either say we're looking at 53 gigahertz or we're looking at God's number, and you said the same thing. So when we narrow down only to these wavelengths, this is the exact same image looking at only the wavelengths of God's number. And look at what this looks like. Does that look like any kind of a shape that you've ever studied in ancient healing traditions? Anything to do with balance, maybe? What does it look like? Exactly. Does it look anything like that? I'm glad you said yes because I put that image there. If you said no, it wouldn't work at all. Exactly. Our entire universe, when we're looking at this wavelength, happens to assume exactly the pattern of energy that we equate with balance. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. Here's the universe in this state of balance that we've come to know. And the next image is where your homework comes in. Have you ever seen this before? What is that? That's the human brain. But it's not the human brain doing just any old thing. What's the human brain doing? It's healing. Our human brain in the state of healing assumes the same pattern of energy as the entire universe in the state of balance that's in right now. Don't ask me to say that twice. I don't even know where that came from. In other words, it's as if when we bring ourselves into alignment at the highest levels of creation, that alignment then filters down as above, so below. It's a fractal experience, a little experience in our bodies of what is happening in the greater universe. Isn't that beautiful? I've never seen this correlation before, and I almost took it out in the interest of time. And I felt like I just enjoy sharing it with you. I wanted to see it. Okay. So, it's the human brain while it is healing. So my question is, what is the brain responding to? What is the brain of that healer responding to? And this is what brings everything together. The brain is responding to a heart-based experience. You're going to begin seeing this. We're going to work with it. Our heart, we can intentionally, on demand, create a condition in our hearts that send a signal to our brain and align that healing state. The brain's just following the instructions. Our brain's sitting there saying, okay, I'm waiting for you to tell me. What is it you'd like for me to do? And that instruction's coming from our heart. We have grown up in a civilization, in a culture, in a society where we were taught the brain does everything. Because it's a male-oriented society, and men think with their brain, right? There's a whole workshop we could do on that. So what is the brain responding to? Well, the answer to that question is right here. Every moment of every day, there's a conversation between your heart and your brain. It's a two-way conversation. Your heart is sending a signal to your brain. Based on the quality of that signal, your brain is sending chemistry back into your body. The quality of that conversation is called coherence. So we're going to talk about coherence a little bit. You're going to hear this word a lot. If it sounds technical to you, pretty soon it won't, because you'll be so used to hearing it. It's just about a kind of balance. And the optimum coherence for you engineers out there, you can actually measure, is 0.10 cycles per second, 0.10 hertz. It's a very low frequency signal between our hearts and our brains. This is the same signal that communicates with the magnetic fields of the Earth that the satellites pick up. Okay? So, low coherence. When we are in a low coherent state, if you can measure respiration, heart rate, or pulse, it will give you an idea of the coherence between your heart and your brain. We're going to do it in here with someone in just a moment. So respiration. When you see these rough, jagged, irregular readings, heart rate variability, HRV, could you see how they're irregular and rough? Pulse, transit time. These are all signs of low coherence. The conversation between the heart and the brain is this irregular signal, and it happens in the presence of what we would call negative emotions, frustration, anger, jealousy, hate, rage. You all know that. The flip side of that is that these negative emotions, the consequences, is the negative emotions create a lot of experiences in our bodies that we wouldn't necessarily want to have. Over 1,400 biochemical changes happen in your body when you get angry. When somebody cuts you off on the freeway in traffic, they're off having a great day because they made their exit. You're still reeling from the anger you're feeling because somebody just dishonored you on the freeway. You're triggering 1,400 biochemical changes that last throughout the day, bathing you in stress hormones like cortisol, heart rhythm chaos, cognitive shutdown. You don't perform very well. We don't solve problems well in this state, but you already know that. The flip side of that is in high coherence. Can you see how nice and even and regular these are? Appreciation, gratitude, love, compassion, all things that we would consider to be positive emotions. They facilitate really good biochemical changes. The studies are showing that you can have 3 minutes of high coherence and you will trigger a 100% increase in the DHEA levels of your body. That's the anti-aging hormone. That's the precursor to all the other hormones in your body that will last for 6 hours after that 3 minutes. We're going to do it in here today. We all look younger when you walk out of here today. Isn't that great? We'll all be 90 minutes older in time, but we will not have deteriorated in that 90 minutes. That's the key. Heart rhythm coherence is much improved in the presence of high coherence. So these are all the effects. Well, what does that mean? If our heart is so powerful, and it can do all these things, how come it seems like people die between about 70 and 100 years of age? You ever ask yourself that? I ask audiences all the time, why do we die? And first people laugh. They say, well, we die because of old age. Old age is not a disease. That is a catch-all for medical people who don't know what else to say when they're asked that question and they want to sound authoritative. There's nothing wrong with being 600 years old. As a matter of fact, the ancient Essenes said that you and I are living in bodies that should be here 900 years. I'm going to talk about this for just a minute. 900 years. Now, it sounds silly to us, to some. Would you ever want to live here 900 years? Why? Because of what our life has been like up to this point. Think how much you could get done in 900 years. You know, we think about a project in terms of 5 or 10 years. What could you get done in 100 years? Or I like to think of this. What would it mean if we were 900-year bodies and you look at another human in the eye and say, honey, I love you. Will you spend the rest of your life with me? 900 years. Some people say yeah, and some people say, God, no. All right, these are facts. Every cell in your body has the ability to reproduce and heal itself, bar none. Even cells that we were told could never do so. Brain cells now are documented as healing and reproducing themselves. Spinal cord tissue that we were told could not do these things. Heart tissue that we were told could not do these things. Every one of you have stem cells in your body right this minute. You don't need to get them from a newborn infant. They're with you from the moment you were born. They actually live right at the point behind your navel. And they're waiting. Your stem cells are waiting for you right now. They're waiting for you to send them the instruction so they can do what they came into this world to do. For some of you, they've been waiting a long time. For some of you, you talk to them every day. The language that allows us to access this is the language of the heart. People say, well, what about the DNA? We've heard that DNA can only replicate so many times and those little telomeres break off. They get brittle and they break off. They can, but you know what? Your body is so brilliant that you have an enzyme that repairs those if it's given the instruction to do it. There's no reason. Our hearts are such amazing, amazing organs. But the leading cause of death in adults in the Western world, age over 65, what do you think it is? So it's called heart disease. I began looking at it. I said, well, what is heart disease? I want to know what this is. I found that our heart beats about 100,000 times each day. Mine's beating harder right now because I'm working really hard for you all. Because I love you right now. I'm loving you right now. It's the best way I know how to love you in this room. Our heart pumps about 6 quarts of blood through 12,000 miles of arteries, vessels, and capillaries every 24 hours. I was trained as an engineer, and when you have a piece of equipment that the whole mission depends on, it's called mission critical. If that piece of equipment fails, everything stops. I would call our hearts mission critical. Would you agree? Okay, mission critical equipment one of two things happen. It's so important when you build it, you either build the piece of equipment and then you build a backup in case it fails, and you build a backup to the backup, or you build the original piece so well that it simply cannot fail, or if it does, it can repair itself. We've only got one heart, so we don't have a backup or a backup to the backup. So that means this heart must be a really good heart that we've got. So, why would it suddenly stop after only 70 to 100 years? A gentleman named James Blumenthal, Duke University, did some studies. And what he found, high blood pressure, vascular plaque, stroke, those are the symptoms that we call heart disease. But what he found was that they actually result from what we call unreconciled long-term fear, frustration, anxiety, disappointment. This is published Journal of Consulting Clinical Psychology, Volume 67, 1999, so it's on your audio. And I looked at all these and I said, those are all symptoms of something else. What is it? What are they really telling us? What the studies found, and this is probably no surprise to you, but I know you're going to feel it the minute I say it. These are all symptoms that fall under the umbrella of hurt. Unreconciled hurt. So I had to ask myself, do we hurt ourselves into death in this world? Is it the hurt that we have from the loss of everything that we cherish, including a way of life that we've always known? Is that really what's happening here? Unresolved hurt. Well, I mentioned to you that the ancient Essenes talk to us about our beliefs. And what they say is this. They say that when our soul hurts from the pain of the things that we lose and are familiar in life, that our pain's transmitted into the body as the spiritual quality of the energy, of the life force that goes into every cell. But the same thing works in reverse. These are from the book, The Spontaneous Healing of Belief. At the back of the book, there are a series of belief codes. That was belief code 20. Belief code 21 says the same principles that allow us to hurt ourselves to death also work in reverse. They allow us to heal ourselves into life. Yesterday, those of you who were with us, you saw two ladies who are documented as being 120 years old right now. And we know there are others out there. And I mentioned that the ancient Essenes, they said that we literally have come to this world. There's no reason for us not to be here for 900 years. But I'm going to tell you, the next thing I say, you're going to laugh when you hear it, but then it'll make a lot of sense. They say that we're in 900-year bodies, but that the first 100 years are the toughest. I told you. They said the first 100 years are the most difficult, and here's the reason why. It's in the first 100 years of a human life that you and I will suffer the hurt and the loss of everything that we cherish. Everything that we know is true, everything that we've come to love and hold dear will leave us in that first 100 years. And what they say is that most humans simply cannot survive the learning curve. That our heart is such a magnificent, powerful organ that 70 to 100 years appears to be how long our heart can hold up to the stress and the pressure of that unresolved hurt before it simply gives out. But they say if you can find a way, can you feel that right now? I'm looking at your faces. I know you feel it. If you can find a way to be with the things that you love in this world, to be with the people and the experiences, the pets, the family, cherish every moment as the present moment, and when those things leave us for whatever reason, if we can find a way to redefine what that leaving means to us, that we have a whole new life in front of us. And this is what the ancients had learned to do. You and I are living at the end of a 5,125-year-long cycle. That's the end of a 25,625-year cycle that happens to be happening at the same time our planet is crossing over the galactic border. Everything that we have ever known and loved and cherished is changing. We're the generation that is bridging all that has ever been with what is yet to be, and we are learning to reconcile this in our lives. Whether we're talking about a planet or we're talking about our daily careers, our daily lives, the same thing. That's why this time is so precious and so special. Well, I think it even goes deeper than that. I suspect it even goes deeper. This is a Greggism. The Essenes don't say this. But you all have heard, and I have as well, that we come from a realm. We're not from around here. If you want to see an alien, look at the person next to you. Nobody's from around here. We're here for a while. We're loving each other. We're going to share some time together. But we come from a realm where we don't have these bodies, and we are in spirit, in family, linked as a unity, as a oneness. And I suspect that the original hurt that we feel from leaving that togetherness and coming into the isolation and the loneliness and the separation of a single human body is probably the hurt that we're all really dealing with. We might not talk about it at the water cooler on Monday morning after the football game at work, but I think that's probably what's happening. And we so long for that connection that we try to recreate that family in this world with partners and friends and siblings and pets and places and things to help us feel those things that we long to experience again. Do you think that's possible? I think it is too. And I think the first step in healing is saying, I think it's possible. So thank you for that. I feel healed already. All right. First 100 years are the hardest. I'm on a 200-year plan. Who's going to be on the 200-year plan? Who do I get to see in this room 200 years from now? We'll make a date. Cool. Okay. All right. Stem cells, wake up. Okay, what we found yesterday is a human heart. How can the human heart have that effect? Here's how. Science are telling us the answer. Right here, the human heart has an electrical field that's about 100 times stronger than the one of the brain. Human heart has a magnetic field that is about 5,000 times stronger than the brain. This is why it's easier to feel your way into the solution, to feel your way into the healing, to feel your way into your heart's desire than to engineer it with your mind. There's sometimes it's good to engineer with our minds. If you're going to build a space shuttle and send some people to another world, you want good engineers and you want them to use their mind and you want them to have good sleep and have a really good day the day they do it. But if we're engineering life, this is quantum heart-based engineering. We're working with a different field here. All right, so coherence, 0.10 cycles per second. How in the world do we do something like that? Well, this is what I wanted to know. And as an engineer, I was trained to look in the world around me for the answers. In 1986, I had my first journey into the highlands of central China and Tibet, looking for the places that had been least disturbed by Western civilization, thinking that maybe there we would have a better idea. I would have a better sense of what we had lost. And if we could find the principles and then bridge them with the best science of today. This is the question I ask. I said, we're living a world that's changing so fast. And there's this judgment about either following the path of science or the path of spirituality. I said, what happens if we marry our two great ways of knowing? Marry the best of our spiritual traditions and the best of our science into a greater wisdom if it's going to help us. How do you feel about it? You think that's the way to go? To honor our past? Well, I think that's exactly what's happening right now. So in Tibet, it's an amazing, beautiful part of the world. It was in this monastery where we met this beautiful little monk. Now, I'm real close to the screen, and you all are on the edge. I don't even know if you can see this. Can you see that he's got a smile on his face? Can you see that? His cheeks are kind of puffed out right there. This beautiful little monk, there's a whole story I could tell you here. In the interest of time, I'm going to have to go fast. But it was this monk, I asked the question I asked every monk, every nun, every opportunity I had. I said, do you have a secret hidden library in this monastery? And after a lot of conversation and some camaraderie and some really bonding experiences together, it was this little monk that said yes. And my next question was, can I see it? I had a group with me. I said, can our group see this library? He said, yes. Wait right here. Well, time means nothing in Tibet. I'm going to tell you that right now. So this little monk, see these keys in his hand? He got on his bicycle and he rode 30 miles in one direction to another monastery to get those keys and 30 miles back while we wait right here. It was worth the wait because now he's taking us into this empty chanting hall. And if you've never seen one of these, they don't heat them in the winter. They're really cold. They say if you're cold, put on more blankets. So you can see the robes are so thick they stand up even when the monks leave. And we know that this is a false wall, and behind this wall there's a library. It's 3 stories tall, but it's only 12 feet wide, and it's dark. And they told us that we couldn't use our video cameras. So we went past these 30-foot tall Buddhas of compassion. Went past this hallway that had these beautiful prayer wheels that we rotated every one as we went past, into an absolutely dark room that looked just like that. And I worked hard to get that slide for you. And when the lights came on, what you see next is what we saw when we turned on our flashlights. So this is the first image of this library. And this is, I don't know if you can see, this is my hand with a flashlight right down here. And we're looking at the corner of the room. Okay, so these are the corners, 2 bookshelves, because these are Tibetan books. They've been here 1,500 years. They're loose pages sandwiched between the covers. And I asked my little monk, I said, what's in these books? This is one of those places we could spend the whole morning talking, and I'd love to do it. It's hard not to, actually. I said, what's in these books? And he said, I'd like for you to talk to somebody else to answer that question. So they took us to this monastery down the road to meet with the abbot of the monastery. The abbot is the elder of the monastery. They don't get a lot of company here, so this was a big deal. And all the monks at this particular place, even they don't get to see their abbot sometimes. So they were giving us a private audience. They put on their robes. They were leading us in a very solemn procession up to the place where we were going to meet with this abbot. I had never met this abbot before. I had met the previous abbot who had died unexpectedly. And the man I'm about to meet that you're going to see is the new younger abbot, only in his 80s. And here he is right here. This is a beautiful man right here. So we had to go through the formality of a greeting, and they told me, they said, whatever you do, don't look up, don't look into his eyes. Well, I had to peek. I consciously, I knew I wasn't going to, but it was an automatic thing. But it was okay. He smiled, and it was good. But then they let me ask him some questions. Okay, and I asked him, I was writing the book, The Divine Matrix, when this picture was taken. And I asked him the question, I said, in your tradition, what is the force that holds everything in the universe together? What connects everything? And he went off with a translator, and they had this whole conversation. I could have left that monastery, had a cup of yak butter tea, and come back by the time. They had this whole thing going on. And he came back, and he answered me with one word. I said, what is the force that connects everything in the universe? He said, compassion. And I said, well, wait a minute. Through the translator, I said, is compassion a feeling that we have in our bodies, or is it a force of nature that connects everything in the universe? And he went off and had a conversation with my translator. And he came back and answered me with one word. I thought it was a mistranslation. I asked him to do it again. He came back with the same word. Is compassion a feeling in our bodies or a force in the universe? He said, yes. This is a very deep, very powerful teaching. Because this beautiful man at 17,000 feet above sea level, halfway around the world in this old monastery, is telling us, as he has been taught in his tradition for centuries, that you and I are born with the ability to create an experience inside of our body, specifically in our heart, that literally, not metaphorically, literally attunes us to the very stuff that connects everything in this universe. And what we do with it after we get there is up to us. Well, about 5 years earlier, I had met this man. This was the previous abbot of the monastery. This is the man that mysteriously died. We don't know what happened to him. And this was the man that I had asked the first question to when I went there. Isn't he a beautiful man? I asked him, I don't know how old he is. They wouldn't tell us. I asked a number of times and they just giggled. Because time means nothing to Tibetans. So it was this man, I guess 600 maybe, I don't know. It was this man I asked the question. I said, when we see your prayers for 14, 16, 18 hours a day, when we see the mudras and the mantras and the bells and the bowls and the gongs and the chimes and the incense, and we see your prayers on the outside, I said, what are you doing on the inside? When we see a miraculous healing, how did you do that? This is the value of being with a living culture. If you walk into an Egyptian temple, you see some cool hieroglyphs that somebody made a long time ago, but those people are gone. We can't ask them. And we may not even know how to read those hieroglyphs correctly. But these are living cultures. And you can ask them again and again until either they answer you or they get tired of the conversation and kick you out of the monastery. I said, when we see your prayers on the outside, what's happening on the inside? And this is the man that told me, you've never seen our prayers because a prayer cannot be seen. He said, what you see are the things that we do to create the feeling in our bodies. He said, the feeling is the prayer. Feeling is the prayer. Then he asked how we do it in our culture. And I began to realize that when you and I lost this part of our biblical texts in the 4th century, 1700 years ago, the very books that were edited and removed from our spiritual traditions are the ones that tell us of the power of human emotion and heart-based experience to move this world, to heal our bodies, and to create that peace. And we know that because those texts are now being recovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Nag Hammadi libraries, and the Coptic libraries. Feeling is the prayer. Well, specifically the feelings of appreciation and gratitude. And this is where we're going to go with the whole thing. Appreciation and gratitude. When we experience heart-based feelings of appreciation and gratitude, that is how we create that heart-brain coherence. But your mom knew that. How many of you, when you were children, went to bed and your mom said, before you go to sleep every night, you give thanks for everything in your prayer? Remember that? Some of you? How many? Well, a lot of us may not have known exactly why we were being told to do this, but this is what gratitude and appreciation, in the English language, scientists have found that these two words best approximate the feeling in our heart that creates 0.10 hertz and floods our body with life-giving chemistry from gratitude and appreciation. The key is to feel from the heart as if the outcome already exists. Now, this is important. The healing that happened of the Japanese girl and her tumor, or if you were with us yesterday and you saw 3 practitioners having a feeling and a cancerous tumor disappeared inside the body of a 46-year-old Chinese woman. It's the same feeling. In the early 1980s, 200 people were trained to have the kind of feeling we're talking about. They were stationed throughout the war-torn areas of the Middle East during the Lebanese-Israeli War, the first Israeli-Lebanese War. And when they did what they were trained to do, all that happened was peace in a broad geographic area. Only 200 people. It's a potent language, a very potent language. What is common with all 3? My friend David, those of you who were with me yesterday, the Native American prayer of rain. He didn't pray for rain to happen, because if you say, Great Spirit, please let there be rain, you've just acknowledged the rain's not there. You've just acknowledged the very condition that you're hoping to change. He felt the feeling as if the rain had already come. The healer in the Japanese hospital felt the feeling as the woman was whole and complete, fully enabled, fully capacitated. The 3 practitioners felt the feeling as if that woman were whole and complete, fully enabled, fully capacitated. They didn't even focus on the tumor. They didn't focus on the tumor, because if you do, you're judging the tumor as right or wrong or good or bad. They held this woman in the feeling of her greatest potential. And this is something you and I can do for one another every minute of every day. Every minute of every day, to the best of our abilities. The woman in the medicineless hospital in China, it's not about making her tumor go away. If she had a cold, it was probably healed. If she had a hangnail, it was probably healed that day. The 19-year-old woman in the Japanese hospital. It wasn't about focusing on healing anything, because the moment you make that judgment, you've just created the energy that may stand between you and your heart's desire. This is a subtle and powerful difference. So please work with me on this. It's the difference between coming from the outcome rather than working toward the outcome. Does that make sense? How many saw the movie Ghost? Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore. Anybody see that movie? Wasn't that a great movie? Okay, what's your favorite scene in the whole movie? Just tell me. Everybody in every country and every audience will tell me the same scene. So just tell me right off. Which one was it? The Potter's Wheel. Wasn't that a hot scene? She's there. Her husband's gone. She's missing him. He's a ghost. He doesn't know how to be a ghost. She's working out her frustrations on the Potter's Wheel with a nice vase. It has nothing to do with this workshop, but I just have to acknowledge it right off the bat because it's everybody's favorite scene. But there's another scene that has a lot to do with this workshop. If you haven't seen the movie, I don't want to spoil it for you. There's another scene. Patrick Swayze's a ghost, and he's at a train station. Remember, he's at the train station, and he's on the subway. It's not the tarmac. I've been in airports so long. It's the platform. He was at the platform. He was at the platform of the subway. He's a ghost. There's a can lying on the ground, and as a mortal man, he liked to kick cans. He tried to kick this can, and his foot went right through it because he's a ghost. And the more he tried to kick it, this is his man brain saying, I'm going to make that can move. So he scrunched up his face to get red. His veins are popping out, and he's trying harder and harder to do the same thing that didn't work the first time, thinking it's going to make a difference the next time he does it. And he's getting really frustrated, and the can's not going anywhere. And all of a sudden, another ghost comes by and says, hey, man, it doesn't work that way. Can't do it like that here anymore. He says, you got to feel it. And the minute he did that, the can was moving. He was moving it, kicking it all over the place. That's a perfect example. It's that subtle, that little shift of coming from the place where we feel that somehow we're going to make or impose our will upon the world to the switch that comes from the place that our heart's desire has already happened. It simply has not been mirrored in the physical reality yet. That's how those healings happened. That's how the peace happened. Does that make sense? I see a furrowed eyebrow or two. It's a very different way for the Western mind to think. Remember the scientific experiment that's happening? We saw in journal Nature early in this program that said observation creates reality. Okay, what we now know is the way we feel, our expectations about our world literally are rearranging the stuff our world is made of on subtle levels if it's a passing expectation. But if we can hold that focus and be very clear about where and how it happens, that is where the miracles happen. That is how you bring change into your world. And we do it through a heart-based experience. And this is what I'd like to do in the time that we have remaining. I want to be very clear. I'm working closely, I have since 1991, with an organization called the Institute of Heart Math. HEARTMATH. How many here have heard of Heart Math? Quite a few? Okay, great. Good people. If you've never heard of them, they are a pioneering research organization that have come from many walks of life. They're medical doctors, authors, engineers, scientists, computer designers, medical technicians. They've left their respective careers at Stanford University, UCLA, private corporations, all come together to study the power of the human heart in ways that have never been explored before. If you haven't heard of them, you're going to a lot, and I'm going to share with you the reason why. There's a new initiative that the media is very excited about that allows all of us to participate in a heart-based experience to bring a transformational shift to the magnetic fields of this planet. Before we do that, let's have some experiences that are the kind that will contribute to that project, and then we'll talk about that a little bit. You okay if we do it that way? One of the things that HeartMath was able to establish in the early 90s is this image, and you've seen it a lot of magazines, articles, that there is a physical field. I mean, this isn't New Age metaphor. It's not the aura. It's not the prana. It's not the chakra. It might be linked to those. This is an electrical and a magnetic field that can be measured around the human heart that looks like a little donut called the torus. It's a tube torus that extends 5 to 8 feet beyond every human heart. We're all within 5 to 8 feet. Actually, we're pretty close in this room. So might be 450, 500 people in the room, but there's a heart field. We are all sharing a heart field in here right now. And it's so real, we can work with it, and we're going to. So what I'd like to do is this. We're going to go through a little process. The steps to the process might look familiar, but the techniques are what I'd like to share with you today. We're going to learn how to focus in our heart. And this, I think, in Western audiences is the most difficult thing to do. You know what I've found? If you tell someone to focus in their heart, you know what they do? They think about focusing in their heart because that's our conditioning. So it's like a muscle. We have to work with it. We're going to feel very precise kinds of feelings, and we're going to do some breathing. So before we can do that, what I'd like to do is this. I knew it would be very fast. This probably isn't the cleanest way to do this in here, but but I'm going to do it this way anyway. What I'd like to do, let me do this. I'm going to bring this up. They have a piece of software that they have allowed me to use as an independent author. Remember, I said if we can measure either pulse transit time, heart rate variability, or respiration, it will give us an idea of the coherence. Who in here would like to have your coherence? Would you like to do it? You're the first one with your hand up. Would you, if you'll come to this side, what's your name? Charlotte. And how do you feel about mathematics? Do you like math? Oh, we're going to have fun. This is Charlotte. Charlotte, this is our audience. If you come up, please give Charlotte a hand for coming up here and being brave. Would you have a seat in this chair? Okay, now, have we ever met before? Do I have anything in my sleeves? No. All right.
We already know each other.
Yes, I know. All right, so what we have here, it's a really sophisticated piece of software made very simple to use. This is called an M-Wave PC, EM, Emotional Wave PC. There are a lot of different modes that we can use. And what I'm going to ask you to do, if you'll take your index finger, place it in this cuff to where the fleshy part of your finger is over the little diode underneath. And your right, this hand, and then I'm going to ask you just to put it right. Can you feel the little diode in there underneath your finger? And comfortable. And if you'll have your hand motionless, and you can either put it on your leg or you can set it on this desk, whatever you'd like to do. Okay, and I'm going to go into a mode. It's a kind of a technical looking mode, but there's a lot of things that we can do here. And we'll begin. It's going to do a little calibration. And I'm not asking her or you to do anything special right now. So it's going to calibrate. What you see is up on the top of this, we're going to actually be able to look at her heart rate variability. And I believe these are, I think they're 30-second windows here. This is her current heart rate. It's at 83. And in just a moment, it's going to take all the information it's getting from her body, from Charlotte. And Charlotte, you can see it right there on the screen. Everything that's happening, and it's going to determine her coherence ratio between low, medium, and high, red, blue, and green. There's no contest. Everybody is different. And usually this is what happens. 100% red, because that's the way we are in our daily lives until we make a change. Okay? So this is precisely what we want to have happen here. What I'd like to do, I'm going to ask Charlotte to do something. And I'm going to ask you all to help from where you are. And I'm going to ask that you not watch the screen. You've seen it. You know what's going on here. If you watch the screen, you're mesmerized by the technology, and you can't go into your heart if your focus is there. So I'm going to invite you first to close your eyes. Everybody just close your eyes. Put your notebooks down for a few seconds here. Charlotte, if you'll do the same thing. You won't need to take any notes on this. When I ask you to move into your heart, please close your eyes. When I ask you to move into your heart, what I learned from the Tibetans and from my native friends is the best way to do this, it's a secret that they use all the time, is if you will physically touch the center of your chest, touch your sternum over your heart. You can either do it momentarily, or you can place your hand there and leave it there, or you can form a prayer mudra and hold it there. But the physical sensation that you feel in that part of your body will automatically draw your awareness to that place. This is why they ask you not to cross your legs or all these other things, because if you're feeling a pressure between your knees or your thighs, your awareness is going there as well. So when you can just sit and you feel a light pressure in the center of your chest, okay? And if you'll move your attention to that part, move your attention into your heart and begin to breathe from that place just for a moment. All right, if you'll continue to breathe and into your heart center, to the best of your ability, if you can feel the feelings of gratitude and appreciation. Okay, gratitude and appreciation for anything, whatever that means to you. Everyone has a different experience of gratitude and appreciation. For some people, it's a look of their children's eyes when they wake up in the morning and they're happy just because they woke up. Or for some people, it's looking into the eyes of your spiritual master in your meditations, into the eyes of Mary or Jesus or Buddha or God. For some people, it's the feeling that you feel when you hold a newborn child in your arms, or you hold a brand new puppy or a little kitty in your arms. Whatever that feeling is for you, if you can feel those feelings of gratitude and appreciation. And as you feel those feelings in your heart, if you can breathe from that place, breathe those feelings of gratitude and appreciation. Okay? Keep your awareness in your heart. Remember to breathe. Just feel the feelings of gratitude and appreciation. As you feel them in your heart, allow that feeling to move away from your body into the room around you. But this is an active process of focus, gratitude, and appreciation in your heart. It's not about zoning out. Okay? To the best of your ability, feel those feelings of gratitude and appreciation. Okay, if you take one more deep breath and slowly begin to open your eyes. And we can see what happened here. We began, Charlotte, you did a really good job. Thank you. We didn't have a good connection on her finger at first, and it wasn't tight enough. She has a tiny little index finger, and it was bouncing around. But once we began to get the readings, right in here, we started getting good readings, and almost immediately, see, she was in 100% low coherence when we hooked her up, as most people are. If you just walk in from the street and you sit down, you're in a low coherent state. But within, and this is why I wanted you to see this, once we got this finger, can you see where it's jumping up and down here? The finger cuff isn't on right. But once we got the good connection, look at this. This is a minute between 2 and 3, and then there's about another half a minute. So in a minute and a half, once we got that connection going, she went from a 100% low coherence down to 72% low coherence, 15% medium, and 13% high, and those numbers kept climbing. If we went ahead and did this for another minute, 2 minutes, what we'd see, and this is what we do, what we'd see is the red would begin to decrease, and we'd see more and more coming up on the other side. And it happens really quickly if we can follow the focus into our heart without zoning out. But a lot of people are trained, when they go into that space, they just doze off. I mean, I've had people snore, and that's okay. Just when you wake up, get back with the program, Or if the person next to you wakes you up, you'll be with the program. I wanted you to see how quickly, in a minute and a half, she was already in 13% high coherence. That's how quickly your heart will respond if you give it something to work with. We're going to do this one more time. Charlotte, you did a really good job. I'm going to unhook this. Thank you. And you can unhook this. And you're now in 13% high coherence. Have a really good day. And thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. You can go down this way. Don't do this while you're driving. Actually, you want to do it while you're driving. I need another volunteer. Because this looks a little technical, not so much fun. I had the opportunity to put my hands on the tummy of an infant within about 24 hours of coming into this world. And it was a really powerful experience for both of us. We were hooked up on the monitor, and it was very, very cool to see how this happened. So this looks a little sterile, looks a little technical, little left brain. It's good if you want to know what's happening. But you can use this. Young people like to see pictures. Children, adults like to see pictures. There's another mode that we can use this. And what's your name?
Phyllis.
Phyllis, hi. Welcome to the stage. Audience is Phyllis. Phyllis, this is the audience. If you would be so kind, if you can put your finger in there until the fleshy part of your index finger is over that little diode and it feels, not all the way through. You want the fleshy part of
this part, right?
You want the fleshy part of your finger to feel that little diode underneath. Can you feel it there? And if you can you take off an earring? I'm going to do something else as well. There's a different mode that we can use here that's a lot more fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a garden, because we've always heard that we live in a garden anyway, right? We came to the garden of this world. We're going to make it beautiful. What should happen here, if I do this well, that garden doesn't look very exciting. It's all in black and white. What will happen is the sensor will pick up what's happening in the room. When you do what you're doing, because we're sharing a heart field, to some degree, we are all being picked up. We're all sharing a heart field in this room. And as the sensor goes through, every 7 seconds, it will take a reading of the coherence, and it will populate this garden, depending on what that coherence looks like. Okay, so you okay if we do that? All right, so let's do this one more time. If you don't watch this, because you'll be mesmerized. You'll be mesmerized when this happens. Close your eyes, touch the center of your chest, move your heart awareness into your chest, and just breathe. Just breathe from that space. Focus at the place of your body where you feel that sensation. Out of your mind and into your heart. And to the best of your ability, feel for you what are feelings of gratitude and appreciation. Gratitude and appreciation for anything, whatever that means to you. We've all got something to feel gratitude for in this world. And continue breathing. Just feel feelings of gratitude and appreciation in your heart. Keep your focus in your heart. Touch that place right over the center of your heart. This is what the monks and the nuns do. They feel the feeling of gratitude and appreciation for the things that they choose to bring to fruition in this world. And you can do this in your life. Feel the gratitude and appreciation for the healing of your loved ones, as if it's already happened. The healing of your own body. For the healing that happens in every moment of every day. Feel it right now. Breathe that feeling into your heart. For the safety of our loved ones, the safety of our children, the peace between nations that's already happened. Gratitude and appreciation for the new world that began with the election of a new leader in this country. The whole world is watching. Gratitude and appreciation for the opportunity to choose. Touch the center of your heart. Touch it with your hands. And just breathe that feeling into the world. And you're doing right now exactly what those monks and nuns were trained to do. If you take one more deep breath and slowly begin to open your eyes. How many of you have ease finding that gratitude and appreciation in your hearts? You do it? Is it hard for anyone to find that place? We found even with young children who have had really tough lives, if you can tell those children to feel what it feels like when they hold a baby bunny in their arms, even kids that have had a tough time can feel that. We had problems with a connection up here, but we got a little bit. We got some color in our waterfall. If we had done this longer, we'd populate the whole garden. I promised that I would honor our time frames here today, but you get the idea. You get the idea of what this feeling is all about, right? It's not a feeling that you think about in your mind. It's something that you create in your heart. You did a great job. Thank you very much. You helped us populate a waterfall a little bit. Thank you very much. And we're almost finished. One more thing. Okay, so what you're doing right now, that feeling in your heart, stems from a new discovery that Earth and the magnetic fields of the Earth and the human heart work in the same frequencies. In other words, we're feeling those feelings, and our heart is 5,000 times stronger magnetically than our brain. What we're actually doing is we're communicating with the very fields that sustain life on Earth. This has led to this new project bringing millions of people together across cultural boundaries, religious, spiritual, international boundaries. It doesn't even matter what belief system, how you meditate or how you pray, bring everyone together to create coherence in a very precise way. It's led to a hypothesis that when many of us come together, strong collective emotion has a measurable impact. Our satellites are telling this on the fields of the Earth, a new project that is now called the Global Coherence Initiative. I'm going to talk just a minute about what it is, how you can participate if you choose. The goal is to unite millions of people from varied beliefs and cultures to shift global consciousness from instability and chaos into balance and cooperation by doing just the kinds of things that you are doing right now. The Institute of Heart Math is heading this up. It's a two-phase project. They are building hundreds of sensors, deploying them throughout the world to measure the fields that tell us about our hearts. And then they are training. Their goal is to have trained 100,000 people by the end of next month. We're about 2/3 of the way there right now in the techniques that you're learning to do. If you would like to know more about the Global Coherence Initiative, if you go to my webpage, the home page in the middle, there's a button that says click here to learn about Global Coherence Initiative. You'll have a slideshow, and it will tell you how to do everything from a passive observer just to watch this project. If you want to become a member of a community and have your data input, you can do that. If you want to become a trainer and teach people a myriad of techniques working with the Heart Math folks, you can do that. It's all right there. I'm excited about this project because it is the first time a science-based initiative has been embraced by the global media, and it's happening right now. It's happening right now at a time that the experts are telling us you and I are living a time unlike any other time of 5,000 years of recorded human history. The world is changing, the cycles are converging, and the very fields that sustain life on the earth, you and I are learning to communicate with those fields, commune with those fields, through our hearts, which we were born to do to begin with. Your heart is the one organ in your body that creates the strongest electrical, the strongest magnetic field, much stronger than your brain. And it's all coming together at the close of a great cycle as we end one world age and move into the next. What a beautiful, beautiful convergence of experience. Right now, we are posed on the precipice. We've got a choice. Where are we going? It's yet to be decided. You and I are making the choice right now. And the question is, what are we choosing? You now have the language with which to make that choice. And everything we've done in here is a context for everything that you will see in this conference, in your world, in your life beyond. We ran over a few minutes. I want to tell you how much I appreciate this time together. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for our volunteers. God bless. Have a really good day. Thank you.
For another amazing Gregg Braden video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I was born in a very conservative community in the middle of this big, beautiful country of ours in northern Missouri. Anybody here from Missouri at all? Yeah, every once in a while there's one. I left as soon as I knew there was another place to go.